Mike Davenport.
Here.
Christopher Espinoza.
Here.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Here.
Terry Pavasich.
Here.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Here.
Nancy Kupka.
Here.
Scarlett O'Hara.
Here.
And Jade Toledano.
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum, let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Cheryl Fuller.
Okay, our first order of business tonight is seeking approval of the minutes for the February 28th, 2022 business meeting and the March 7th, 2022 workshop meeting.
So moved.
Chris and Terry.
Thank you. Christopher Espinoza.
Yeah, aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the minutes are approved. Next, we move on to the first reception of visitors' public comment. This meeting agenda includes 2 opportunities for comments from the audience. This first reception of visitors is intended for audience members to address the board about any agenda item on which the board will vote. The second reception of visitors is intended for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes to provide all visitors an equal opportunity to address the board. Individuals needing more time should submit their thoughts in writing to the board secretary, Mrs. Nidak. Visitors addressing the board need to submit a comment slip to the board secretary and will be invited to the microphone. Prior to addressing the board, audience members should state their full name. The proceedings are being tape recorded and live streamed for the purpose of producing accurate meeting minutes and informing the public. And I reserve the right to modify these protocols if circumstances warrant. Audience observation of these protocols is appreciated.
I don't believe we received any slips for the first reception of visitors.
Okay. Moving on, return to in-person learning.
I'm getting there. All right, as the board can see, our numbers have continued to be low since the Omicron surge returned. Since we've made our changes in protocols, we haven't seen any drastic uptick or change. So that's the end of my report. Any questions?
That's good.
All right. At this point, we're going to turn it over for a strategic plan update. I'm going to bring Jill She's thirsty.
Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. I'm happy to introduce to you, and you've already met her virtually, but this is Susan Brott. She's from CISO Communications, and she conducted interviews with you for the strategic plan, and she's here today from Minneapolis, traveling. She's been with CISO for 2 years, since 2020. I think.
Yes, thank you.
2020. And previously, she worked in school communications for 20 years. So she's familiar with my job and has been facilitating all the engagement sessions and has been doing a great job. And I'm so happy that members of the group are here today, our core planning team. So you're going to hear from them a little bit. But Susan is first going to give an overview of where we are today.
Sounds great.
Oh, sorry.
The magic clicker.
Usually Hank does this, so, okay. He relinquished control.
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you so much for having us, Madam President, Superintendent Thiele, and Board. We are happy to be here with the core planning team, and again, I'm just going to be here to talk a little bit about process, and then we're going to turn it over to members of the core planning team, because that's really members of your community, and they should be the ones speaking about some strategic directions that they have come up with. So, a lot of what we're going to go through, I'll go through really kind of quickly. But first, we wanted to talk a little bit about the different elements that we do when we do strategic planning. And so Hank had a really kind of nice analogy recently about talking about, the strategic directions and the mission and vision and values. So we have a mission, vision, values that we're also working on updating. That's kind of a parallel process involving different members of leadership and some of the members of the core planning team. Actually, we met today again. So again, for the first time, sorry. I forget which times they're meet again. But, so those are really those big public-facing kinds of pieces and elements that we want to make sure that really speak to who District 99 is. And then the strategic directions are the core work that the core planning team has been working on, taking all of that input from last fall and really kind of creating some directions based on the community representation and bringing it to you, the board, and you will be voting on it later this spring. And that's the direction that then you give to the superintendent and the leadership, who then kind of underneath in the iceberg, we have, you know, all of those action plans and tasks and timelines and things like that, that's where the meat of that really kind of sits, but it doesn't necessarily, everybody always sees it. So that's the how that it gets done. So just a little bit of what we're working through there. This is the strategic planning timeline. So you can see we started last fall with engagements. Like I said, or as Jill already mentioned, I had the opportunity to interview each of you by phone, I think, or some on Zoom. And then I had an interview with the superintendent as well. Then I was here in November. We did some in-person engagements. And we had some wonderful input, especially from students at the high school, both high schools. We met during lunch and had lots and lots of paper on the wall. So it was really wonderful to get that. I know Jill's already talked to you a lot about that. We also did some focus groups and some different open forum sessions. And then in February, we were going to do it in January, but COVID kind of reared its head a little bit. So we pushed it to February. We had a 2-day retreat with the core planning team where we really dug in, and we'll talk a little bit about that process there, but we really went through a number of different pieces. Then we came back just a couple of weeks, the 10th, like not even 2 weeks ago. We were back to meet again to sort of refine some of those strategic directions, and then so that's kind of where we're at right now. Just looking ahead, we'll be doing some more, we did some community input already. We'll be getting some more information about strategic directions from you all tonight, taking any notes from that, and Jill and I, and we'll kind of take that back and reformat it. And then hopefully you will be voting on that later this spring when the full thing comes together. So engagement, we'll go through this really quickly because I think Jill has already presented this to you. But again, we did personal interviews, focus groups, and open sessions. We had great input from all of those groups. Just again, those are some of the key themes that you already saw in the engagement report, but a lot of overlap with a lot of them, talking about social emotional learning, talking about life skills, talking about student voice really being, and mental health really being things that came up a lot, and that certainly came up in our discussions with the core planning team. So as we think about that, again, you saw already that we had a number of community applicants. There was an open call, and we really tried to make sure that we had good representation. And so originally had 12. I think we went down to 11 because one person wasn't able to make the switch from the January to the February sessions. And so we were able to meet, and I think one of the most powerful things in our 2-day workshop in February, which both days were supposed to be in person, the second day ended up being virtual because of supposed snowstorm that never really came. But
Came later in the day.
Yeah. But we met over Zoom, and it was still a good workshop. And one of the things we started off with was, just really, what did you think about day one? And to hear people say that they felt heard, in particular, our students said that they felt heard, which I think is a really powerful statement. So what did we do on those first couple days? Those first couple days we did an environmental scan, really just sort of saying what's our current reality, what are we hoping for, what are the trends that are happening in education, kind of just looking at a bunch of different stuff there. We looked at the practical vision, sort of what do we want to see happen in 3 to 5 years. We looked at maybe what's getting in the way, and then we came up with some strategic directions all around that main district, that question about how can District 99 best leverage internal and external resources to better prepare students for college, career, and life. So, and this is all information that you can see later, but in the environmental scan, we really looked at what are the basic facts and data. So anything from demographics to situational circumstances that are specific to District 99. What are some of the recent accomplishments, and what are some of those challenges that might be, we need to be addressing, obviously pandemic being a very large one. Some trends, looking at that, and then also some advantages. So what are some of the benefits and strengths that really give confidence to the future of District 99? The practical vision was a fun kind of exercise, I think, to really get people dreaming about what do we want to see. I mean, we even started with the visualization to kind of say, what does it look and feel like in 5 years? You know, what do you see? What do you hear? And so they ended up in 3 big buckets, kind of focusing on the beyond the walls of District 99. So what does that mean outside of the school day? Beyond academics, and then obviously active and engaged learning. So those were kind of the big areas that we wanted to keep in mind as we work through some of the other processes. The blocks is a challenging one, not to be, to use that word, I guess it's kind of strange to use that word, but it was that they were kind of like, so now that we know what our vision is, what are some of those things that might prevent us from getting there? What are some of the things that are getting in the way? And the reason we do that is like, let's address what's getting in the way right away, so that we don't come up with directions and then find out that we might have some blocks or barriers or challenges. So we worked through some of those. And so some of the blocks that came up was some things about liability and just knowing that we have this responsibility in a school district to make sure that we're doing right by the students and families and staff. Kind of capacity and balance, and that really was significant, obviously, over the last couple of years of the pandemic and how our staff relating to that, how our families relating, how our students relating to that. The readiness for change, knowing that any sort of strategic planning effort is about change. And so getting that readiness for it, even though there are some great things happening here, what could we maybe enhance or improve upon? And then really thinking about that emotional intelligence and attitudes and just sort of mental state. And then what other kind of external pressures might there be? So we went through, we won't spend a lot of time, but this is the draft directions that went out to the community, and these were very, very draft. They were never meant to be final, but just was sort of here's our first guess at what we can do. So what are those innovative, substantial actions that'll move us toward vision? And so we did that with the community as well. That's fine. We worked that, we got feedback from the community, we got feedback from the leadership team, and anybody could participate in that. So I'm going to move to the more fun part and have you stop listening to me and listen to members of our, and I can only remember their first names, so I apologize. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves as well. We do have somebody, the 3 in the front are going to be presenting today, actually, and one back there, and then Kara is also here from the core planning team as well. So I know others wanted to be here, but scheduling just didn't allow it. So we're going to start with, I believe it is Maida, is it not? I think Maida is up first. Oh, I'm sorry. I will go through this. Sure. So here are the strategic directions. My bad. So in order to focus the district's efforts and better prepare students for college, career, and life, and again, we want to remember that these are draft. We want to get some more feedback from you. But we really are thinking about what will District 99 ensure? And that was a word that really came across strongly from the superintendent and others about it's not just enough to create the conditions and hope that it gets there. It's like, what are we doing as a district to make sure that these things happen? So we were talking about an equitable and supportive environment. We're talking about recruitment, retention, support of high-quality teachers. I can't read that over there, so I'm going to read it here. We have growth of student ownership and agency, and then also increased student engagement in post-secondary planning. So now I will welcome Maida, I believe, is our first representative. So if you just want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Maida Kuzminskas. I'm a student at DGS, and I'm obviously a part of the core planning team. One of the things that we did discuss is, like, as seen on the board, an equitable and supportive environment. I feel like as a student especially, I really want to kind of, stress the fact that I want to be in a school environment that I think is not only safe but supportive for me, not just academically, but also socially and just between, like, relationships between teachers and just how I can get the most out of my academic experience in school. And so, like, one of the main points is that, like, ensuring safe and sustainable opportunities. That's just kind of like a broad, like, subject, I guess, but, like, one of the, like, safe and sustainable opportunities for all students is the fact that I get to be able to kind of really orientate my learning into my, like, future and career goals. And I think that also other students should be able to do this individually as well. And so it's just talking about how each of us should have as many opportunities as we can to really kind of further not only our education but our job experience. And under the second bullet point, it's developing and communicating common expectations for students and staff. One of the main things that like us and the core planning team have really fought over is just kind of what is the student expectation and what is the student supposed to do to kind of reach that expectation. And so a lot of the talking was just about how there's this like really broad gap between students who don't really do their work at all and don't go to classes and students who feel like they're being really overworked. And so we are trying to kind of bridge the gap between the two and try to talk about how we can kind of let all students be able to kind of manage their expectations and have teachers and the school itself be able to give students these good expectations and expectations that can kind of fit to everyone individually. And then building a community is kind of what it is. We want a greater community among students and between students and teachers and staff too. I feel like as a student right now, there is a pretty nice community between students and each other, but I feel like we can really work better on creating a better community between teachers and students. If there is one like that's good already, but I think furthering improving the community will help really kind of build the strength of the school in general. Embedding social and emotional learning and equitable inclusive practices. This just kind of includes how we can start really teaching kids outside of the classroom and outside of just doing lots of projects or essays. I think we can really kind of broaden the horizon of how we've been able to teach students into something that's a lot more kind of communicative and a lot more like orientated towards individual students and less as this kind of grade-based system. And then prioritizing open two-way communication. Again, it's kind of reiterated in like the previous bullet points. It's just the fact that we really want teachers and staff that actually care and are empathetic towards students, and this like two-way communication is really important. Just kind of opening communication between students and staff will really kind of further improve the students' learning experience as well.
Thank you, Mila. And I think just to emphasize a little bit more, yes. So a lot of the original work under this umbrella, we kind of merged it with another one. And so we wanted to make sure also that this is both an equitable, supportive environment. Yes, you know, obviously first and foremost for our students, but also for staff. And so how are staff able to have communication with each other, with administration, and so it really is going throughout the organization and not role dependent. So while there's a lot of conversation about students in here, obviously, because we are a school district and that is our mission. See, I'm already saying our, we. It's like, I'm just gonna move here. But it is also, you know, we wanna make sure that all members of the organization feel that supported and equitable access. And then I also wanna make sure, because I know this was a big point for Maida and a couple of the other students, and it's just that access to students and to access to opportunities and programs. So there's different things that, you know, I don't have access because of transportation or because of this or that, and wanting to make sure that there is that equitable access for all students to participate. So thank you, Maida.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Maida, that was a great presentation, thank you.
Thanks.
Really was.
No, she's just up here, I know.
But you said something about, and I'm gonna put you on the spot here, I apologize, but you said something about, you know, having supports to, because you know what you think you want to do, and you want some choices about getting there. And I know, I'm just asking this question, so, you know, off the top of your head, what kind of supports do you think for people, for a lot of younger people who don't know what they want to do? I mean, certainly some people are self-directed, they say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But I would think most people are like, oh, I'm not really sure. So what kind of supports do you think would be most effective in that way?
Yeah, I'm one of those people that have no idea what they're gonna do. So
I'm a lot older than you, I still don't know either.
yeah, I think one of the like main things is just having like a lot of more options available. And like I think in my school currently there's lots of presentations for like different colleges, and we do have a college and career center specifically, but you have to actively like ask for meetings, or you know, you have to always kind of check the agenda to make sure to see if they have any other like open nights for colleges. And I feel like I want something more broad than just going to college or going straight to a job. I kind of want to have that like better like firsthand experience for any kind of like job or opportunities that might have, or like, you know, kind of having schooling that's outside of the traditional college experience. I feel like there's not much kind of information or experience about colleges geared towards maybe the arts, and even the arts maybe just like having, instead of going to college, going to like any internships or like anything abroad. I feel like I just want more kind of just like more talk or more information about things beyond college and things beyond just kind of that whole like college, university, or just like college job experience.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Do
I was gonna say, I actually,
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I actually like what you're saying, because when you talk about college and the cost and that kind of thing, having that, I think it's also almost being referred to as gap, just to figure out what that next step would be before you invest kind of money and time and not completely certain of what it is, that thing you want to do. So, yeah, thanks for that.
Do you think it would be helpful to have employers come
Yeah,
and
honestly, I
talk
think
maybe a little bit more about?
it would. I definitely want to know what it feels like to be working in the places or jobs that I think I want to go in. And I think that extra like help from people who have experienced that might help. And I think it's just important to kind of not only get people who have been in college or in jobs, but just get like kind of people from everywhere, or like people who want to actually share their information towards students, I think would help.
And I know that certainly came out as somebody from the outside when we did the focus groups last fall. And there was a focus group of a lot of business people and chamber and different people from the community. And they were, you know, sad because they had done some of that before, but then pandemic stopped some of that. So they're people are very excited to see some of that coming back, I think. So,
Yeah.
sure. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mina. And also just making sure that within the equitable and supportive environment was a lot of discussion about mental health and how do we support the mental health of students in particular, but also the mental health and stress that's going on with our staff as well. So next we'll have Kim introduce yourself about growth of student ownership.
Hi, I'm Kim Benzon. I'm the parent of a sophomore here at South, and I also have a 7th grader over at O'Neill. So the goal I'm presenting, or the strategic direction, sorry, that I'm presenting, is the growth of student ownership and agency. And I'll let you have some ownership and agency and actually reading the bullet points. And I'll just hit some of the high points that I think that some of the big word is growth, that we're not talking about really even an end goal. We're talking about a continuum, and that growth is going to start where the student is, and it's going to go in the direction the student goes, right? So it's that kind of individualized. I also want to emphasize, I think it's in there somewhere, is this the one that has the culture of resiliency? The idea of being accountable and having that culture of resiliency is part of what will help a student grow. And really give them that ownership, even the ownership of the successes as well as sort of the stumbles. I think I want to also emphasize that these strategic directions are not all going in separate directions, right? This is really a web of directions, and this direction supports other directions that you see there, and those other directions will support this one. One of those particularly, I guess, would be the mental health aspect, that we aren't expecting them to do this without our support. That is the whole idea of helping them.
Yeah. And I think, you know, and really thinking about that context and purpose of, you know, not just what am I learning, but why am I learning it? And I think that's a really important thing
Yeah.
for all of us. You know, how do you apply what you're learning? And, you know, as someone who majored in math, it was like, when am I ever going to use calculus or something? But, you know, there are skills that you're learning. And so understanding the why behind it. And I also, not to put Kim on the spot, but this is one that challenged Kim a little bit, because while she is all about growth, you know, I would say she's all about growth, she's also understanding that there's differences and we need to be age appropriate when we're talking about these things. So what's age appropriate for ownership and agency of a 14-year-old might be different than a 17, 18.
Well, and also just where the student is.
Absolutely.
That
Not just age.
that every 16-year-old is not the same. They're all coming from a different place. They all need to grow. They all deserve to grow, but that may look different.
Yeah. So I think that was a key part of the discussions, was that it is about growth, and I love the way that Kim said it just now about how, where are they at and where do they need to go and how do we help them do that. So, but every student getting that growth and agency. So, any questions for Kim?
Got one over
Yeah.
here.
So, was it the feeling of the group that we don't currently have a culture of resiliency?
No, I don't believe that. That is something that we really stumbled with in the meetings, was trying to say we aren't saying this doesn't exist here. What we're saying is that it may exist maybe as a byproduct of something else. We really want to make it a direction we're going. We want it to be a goal, something that's in our view, that we're intentionally making that happen, not just, oh, and by the way.
Making it part of the culture, absolutely.
Right.
I like that. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks. All right.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mary to talk about increased student engagement in post-secondary planning.
Hello, my name is Mary Martin, and I'm a parent of a student who's currently at Downers Grove South, but I've also been in this district for almost a decade, because I've got older kids who've come through. So this is something very near and dear to my heart, which is trying to support the student and the parents or families and the community in increasing the engagement of the post-secondary planning. So the group that everyone, I mean, it even dovetails with what you were saying. One of the very important things that have been laid bare by the pandemic is that college enrollments are going down, costs are going up, and there's something called a silver tsunami of retirements. And there's actually quite a bit of need in the community, intense recruitment for students, both for colleges, because the overall enrollment is down, and also they're going to be, people are needing college graduates, or at least people who can take over from this tsunami of retirees who and this was already happening before the pandemic.
Right.
It's accelerated through the pandemic. So this particular, so how we addressed it was three-pronged. We want to support the students to see beyond, that graduation day. And also get them engaged actively. Already, there's many things that have already been put in place recently, like I think starting next year, the students have to do the FAFSA in order to graduate. So that's the sort of thing that, okay, here's something extremely practical. Everyone should do it. That sort of thing. Also engage and support the role of the parents, families, maybe even siblings, older siblings, in that post-secondary planning.
Yes.
And then, of course, extremely importantly, increase student awareness of and exposure to a variety of options for after high school. Not just college, as we know, many different opportunities. And the people out there, the businesses out there, are just clamoring for this sort of support, because they're looking at already needing, they're looking ahead and seeing that there might not be the qualified people to take over in the midst of this silver tsunami of retirement. So now we did discuss a little bit about, possibility of, how do we go about that? Well, collaborations with schools who are already participating in programs. And of course, prior to the pandemic, there were quite a few things offered in District 99. Dual enrollment classes in other high schools in nursing, web design, skilled trades, co-ops, technical apprenticeships. So lots of possibilities. And I think, so, and then of course, most importantly, this strategic direction is being driven by the need in the community, and also by the students, because not every, if we only say there's, here, there's college, some students just are not willing to embark down that road of student loans and all the rest of it. And there are employers out there who are desperate to hire qualified workers. So basically, this is very much, I think, what we thought was what, basically driven by the students.
And I think one of the key things that, a couple of things, when we first started talking about this in February, I have a memory of one of the students on the team, she's not here tonight, but she was talking about some research that she had done in one of her classes that they had studied through, just looking at state data about those who go to college but who actually complete college. And, the fact that she was bringing this in and saying, what are we doing and how are we preparing students for that, I think was a really sort of, it sparked a conversation in the group for quite a bit. And then also that second bullet about engaging and supporting the role of families in post-secondary planning, understanding that not all families have experience with this. So, how do we help some of those families who this is new to them as well? So how do we support our families with that? So
I have a question. So I get the silver tsunami, and I get why a lot of people probably did look at what was going on and say, I'm going to exit the workforce. But I am curious, I didn't realize that college enrollment was down as a result of,
It's been going down.
Yeah?
Before the pandemic,
And did they have any statistics on what's happening there? I mean, there are some things I could think of, like the expense, of course, but are there any things that they talked about why other than expense and?
Well, it was already going down before.
Yeah, that's what they.
And one can only imagine the expense.
Yeah.
And,
it's also the return on that investment. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that there's also people saying, are there
That's one of the
other
big
ways, other
issues.
things that, do I need a 4-year degree to do X, Y, or
Okay.
Z? And just looking differently at what life is like, and knowing that, many of us, if we went to college, I was all bent on being an orthopedic surgeon, and clearly that didn't work out. So I've been to orthopedic surgeons. I haven't actually been one.
Close enough.
But so, I mean, just thinking about, do you always know what you want to do when you're 18? And so trying to make sure that we're preparing students for it's okay to ask questions. It's okay. What are the skills that are going to help you be nimble and adaptive and to be able to navigate that?
I think part of this also is high schools have done a better job of informing students that there isn't one pathway and that there's multiple ways of going, and impressing on students that, okay, for the rest of your life, you're going to have to do 2 things to keep yourself gainfully employed: work and learn. Like, and those 2 things don't always occur in the order of learn then work, and they can happen at the same time. And it might be, you work for a while and your employer then sends you back to learn, right? So there's a lot of different ways, and, armed forces play into that, and gap years play into that, and there's all of these different pathways. And I know the board has seen us through Attainable Futures in a lot of different ways, show students that there is no one way for any person to go. Everybody's path is unique, and you're kind of seeing the work in high schools across the country talking about that for the last decade. And you're also seeing a huge impact of the pandemic on that as well.
Well, our TCD enrollment
Is going up.
Skyrockets.
going up,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
As a reminder, how many of our students go on to college as a percentage? Thereabouts.
Exact percentage?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know
Less.
off the top of my head what it is.
50, over or under?
Oh, over.
Over.
Okay.
Over 50?
I'm trying to figure
Yes.
out if it's over 75 or not.
But the key, Mike, is how many completed.
I think it's also worth noting that this is kind of, it has sort of trickled down, not to use, into high schools. These decisions are happening for students when they're 16, 17, their colleges are kind of encouraging, direct admits to this school, to that school. What do you want to do? Do you want to go to business school? Do you want to go into engineering? Do you want to, and I think we're offering definitely more sophisticated courses, than certainly when I was in high school. And so, they're making these decisions earlier. There was a time when, you'd go to college and you'd be undecided.
Well, we start the planning in,
Yeah.
Right.
ninth grade,
I mean, I
right? You're
think high
doing career
school
interest surveys.
is
and-
unique
yeah.
in that, like, the second that you get there, you're already like, I'm looking at the next step, and so it's definitely, they're faced with much more sophisticated choices.
Well, I would-
And
Those
need,
pressures,
and need the framework, I guess, to kind of navigate that.
I would offer that we have, pretty broad spectrum of classes that get offered. I mean, the
Okay, yeah.
opportunities for students to explore those interests are far more than when I was in school,
Yeah.
for sure. So,
And I think the key
wanna
that we
compare
really
that
came
to
back
when
to
I
is
was
just
in
increasing that student engagement in it. I mean, yes, we know that you can get emails every day about which colleges are here, or, come to this event or something, but it's really just kind of getting a more intentional engagement. I think even as Maida was speaking before, it's like, how do we develop some of those skills to know that I can go and seek that out?
Yeah.
So they all kind of work together.
I'm excited to see this one framed this way, too. I mean, this is something that's near and dear to me, too. I have 3 in college right now, so.
Okay.
So I definitely get it, and I did an awful lot of work helping my children plan and identify what to do and where to go and how to navigate that whole process. And I wish all students had the benefit that my children had. And I know, and I've tried to help some of my students' friends with this, but it'd be great if the school could do more than what we're doing. And I mentioned before, we have more counselors than most schools. We're already, this is already something that we've been working on, and to see this as one of the 4 targets is great. Thank you.
I wanted to just tell you, Cheryl, that in my research, which is very limited, 15 to 20% less enrollment in colleges. So pretty dramatic. And hence, the colleges are after, pretty intensively recruiting.
I'm not a demographer, how do you?
Yeah, that's the right word.
But I believe that there's some sort of dip in the population too that's causing that particular age group. This was something that was forecast to kind of happen. So I think that there's a number of factors that are playing into this.
I've heard that there are even fewer males going
Okay,
previously. More
Interesting.
females enroll in college, yeah.
Thank you.
thank you.
I'd like to move on to the 4th one, but this is in no way, we purposely did them, I'm sorry, Michelle. We purposely did them as a wheel, because we didn't want it to be like one was more important than the other. And
Good.
so, and I think it's very important that we also pay attention to the recruitment, retention, support of high-quality, that's supposed to say staff, not students. That is my typo, that is not Jill's typo.
Yeah, we're not looking to
Teachers
retain
as-
students after the 4 years.
So we want to.
That's not the goal.
We only want high-quality students.
Unless they're returning as teachers.
So that should say staff, I apologize for the typo. But, Michelle, we have one of our staff members here.
Yes, I'm Michelle Davis. I'm an English teacher at Downers Grove South. I have some notes with me in case I forget, so I will try not to look at them, and I will also not read the bullet points. But when we were talking about the strategic directions and we were talking about the equitable and supportive environment, we kept coming back to teachers as a bullet point. And as we got more community feedback, and even as we continued talking, it was very clear that this needed to stand on its own. And I think talking about things that were a problem before the pandemic that have only worsened after the pandemic, teachers leaving the profession at an alarming rate. Right. So not in District 99, but it's a fear that's there, and it's also something that I'm constantly hearing from my colleagues, and it's being talked about, this feeling at just this need for more support, and what does that actually look like, and how can we do that for teachers and staff. And so I really want to highlight the bottom bullet point, which is nurturing a culture of support and collaboration among all staff. And looking at the comments from the community and talking to as many teachers as I possibly could between the different, meeting days that we had, because I am just one voice, it's very, very clear that two things kept coming back over and over, and that was time and voice. And I think that time has really become so minimal for us that it's really hard to have a work-life balance. And to kind of add on to that, that helps with this equitable and supportive environment for students, because I also think we need support in providing a good school life balance for students. So it's kind of everyone's feeling this, where we don't have enough time to get everything that we need done. Where do we build in that time? I know the new schedule is, fluctuating time in certain ways. How can we build in more time for teachers to collaborate and plan and even grade? Sometimes I'm grading on Saturdays and Sundays and not able to spend time with my own kids. So it can be really difficult to maintain that work-life balance without feeling like this guilt in not being there for your students. Because we also had extensive conversations about meeting the needs of the whole student. And so also the bullet about adapting staff roles. I think a lot of things that we talked about were how can we streamline certain processes that both teachers and counselors are doing. How can we just find one go-to person to do this so that we can cut back on some of that time that we're doing, repetitive things. And I think the most important thing is teacher voice. So I want to say I appreciate even being a part of this strategic planning team, because I felt like I did have a voice to speak on behalf of other teachers. But we're the ones in the classroom day to day with these kids, and we see things that sometimes people outside the classroom don't see. And so being able to, I apologize, I'm pregnant and I'm out of breath talking. It's like really embarrassing. I'm like breathing really heavily. I'm like so excited. But just being able to just let us tell you what we're seeing so that we can make the necessary changes, because sometimes it's like, but this keeps happening and nothing seems to be getting done about it. But it's also, how can something be done if we don't know what's happening? So just being able to maybe just pull the teachers on what's the biggest issue that you're seeing right now, because I do think that there is a balance between supporting the mental health of students and creating student ownership. And that's something that's falling on the teachers a lot too, where we're like, we need support in how to do this, because it's something that's really, really increased this year and added more onto an already very time-consuming career path. So that's sort of kind of what we talked about. Sorry if I talked fast.
No.
And I think that, and Michelle has noted, she said the district does a really good job of providing professional learning and coaching, but it's just how do we continue that, and how do we keep doing that in ways that are like, what are the new needs that we need some help and support on? So we wanted that professional learning piece in there, not because it's not happening. And again, a lot of the stuff that is in the stuff, a lot of the pieces that are in the strategic directions, they're not necessarily new, but they're like, okay, let's really focus and let's, try to make a priority out of this or something, so that we're trying to do that. But I think that was clear. She, she wasn't saying that she wasn't getting any. She just wants to make sure that the support is there with all the other stuff that's going on. So.
Jenny, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, and I'm sure we'll discuss it too, but Gina was saying that one of the things we're trying to incorporate or get out of this hybrid block schedule is teaching certain things like en masse to the whole, resume, whether it's a resume workshop or some other, executive functioning skills, and maybe, I can't think of something that maybe only was covered in a social studies class, might now, be able to be taught to, the school in some of those larger study access.
Yeah, I have a whole list. You're stealing my thunder for the
I'm
hybrid
sorry.
schedule.
But
To
try to take
what Michelle
some
said
things
is
off
really
their
important, is that all the staff knows that all of the students are getting this, right? So it isn't, does the student have this skill or not? It's, we know all students have this set of skills, or have at least been exposed to this set of skills. And it isn't like, in one corner of the building, this is happening, and then the same thing's happening somewhere else, and then it's happening with the counselor. We talk about getting time back. That's one of the aspects of getting time back, is just, I know my students have these skills, I don't have to reteach them, I don't have to dedicate time to it. And you hear from students, like, I did this in my English class, and now I'm doing it again in this class. And I've done
Nice to
this so
hear
many
that.
times, I wish my teacher just knew I knew how to do this. And it's like, well, how are they gonna know,
We
right?
want it to be input, put it into their brains so that they.
Yeah, let them know they have it. So, that speaks to, what we talked about last week, or 2 weeks ago, about
Yeah.
this happening.
And I even think collaboration, we don't really have a lot of time to collaborate with other content areas, and I think that's really important. With the common experience, we're doing a lot, like we have the district policies, but then it's content specific. So I think it would benefit to be able to collaborate expectations on grading, behavior, all of those things across content areas, because what I'm finding is an imbalance in some of the priorities for students because this class does accept late work and this one doesn't. And so I also think that this collaboration among all staff is really important so that it's equitable across all classes, and then I'm not scrambling trying to get students to complete late work because I accept late work, or our department does. So I think that was another thing too, is just collaboration in that way, and behavioral expectations as well, cell phones, things like that. Everyone's got their own policy, and sometimes it's hard to be the person that's like, put your phone away, but so-and-so lets me have it out. Things like that, where it's like some of these things that can really steal a lot of time and become very distracting in the classroom. That's something also that was talked about that I didn't mention.
And that's definitely what we tried to work that into the equitable and supportive environments. Like,
Yeah.
how do we have consistent expectations, and how do we, so that it's not, you're not pitting teachers against each other, and you're not pitting students, and students don't have to prioritize, well, I have to do math because this teacher won't let me do that, but I can put off doing my English homework or something. So we want to make sure that students really have consistent expectations, and staff feel supported in that. Questions for Michelle?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as you can see, and they have said it better than I, they really are a web of directions. They're not, distinct things that they're going to go off. And so depending on any feedback that you might have or questions that you might have, we are happy to entertain them. Otherwise, you'll see this back in probably May, did you decide, I think?
Yeah.
When we would bring back the mission and vision and values, hopefully as well, so.
And I just want to again thank the core planning team for giving them 2.5 days of their
Yes.
time. I was so proud to be part of it, and it was a very positive experience. It was very energizing, so thank you guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely, very exciting.
Thank you.
Having done this in other districts, the enthusiasm and the passion that you have in your community members is really exciting. So it's been fun to work with them. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's gonna be hard to top that.
No, now staffing. Who's driving? Gina's like, don't give me the remote.
Sorry, we have a small cast change here.
I'm waiting for the costume change.
Yeah.
All right, begin? Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're here to talk to you about the large package of the 2022-23 staffing and curriculum overview. Just a reminder how all of this starts is that early in the calendar year, students sign up for classes that they want to take next year. That goes into the brilliant minds of Georgia and Ryan here and their teams. And they throw that into spreadsheets and they figure out how to run all of the classes. Most of those classes, it shakes out pretty easily, and we run those classes. And then it comes down to some difficult decisions about some classes that have fewer students who signed up for it than what we anticipated. And so we have to make decisions about, are we going to run those classes? Are we not going to run those classes? So when I'm finished giving you the overview, Gina will talk through those a little bit. And then Georgia and Ryan will talk about some highlights from those classes that we are going to run. After they're finished, Scott is going to talk through the special services staffing. And then once all of that is done, then it goes to Jeff, and then Jeff looks at the staffing and what that means in terms of who's returning next year, who's not returning next year. So then you'll see on Jeff's reports names specifically about teachers and those cases, and then you'll see that also in consent agenda and then in the resolutions. So a quick overview. In my memo and the charts to you, you can see that through that sectioning process, we are down 4.1 FTE. Most of that is due to a lower enrollment, so there's fewer course requests, so therefore there's fewer sections of classes to run. But we did have some adds. So we added a social worker at T99 that Scott will talk about a little bit. We did end up decreasing a 0.2 department chair. Department chair release is calculated based on the number of teachers who are teaching in that department. So occasionally the sectioning process causes there to be fewer teachers in a department or more teachers in a department, and that causes that calculation through their contract to add or take away some release time for them. We released a 0.2 data at North, which is a teacher FTE that we use to run data reports with us. That brings us in line. North and South now have the same, which is a 0.2, and that reflects our usage of those. And the last thing is to remember, we talked about the student success coordinator. Those were actually in last year's numbers because we added those, but those were grant funded. So the only difference how that plays into this year is we're using local funds. So down 3.5 FTE staff overall, but there is an increase of 2.0 because now we're locally funding the student success coordinators. So that's the general overview of our staffing. I'm going to hand it to Gina. Gina's going to talk through some of those difficult decisions that had to be made about courses.
Thanks, Rob. So each year we come forward with courses that enrollment was less than 20. Some of those courses we suggest canceling. We want to move to cancel based primarily on enrollment. And other courses we would like to run. As you may note from the courses that were submitted, we actually do have a decrease in the number of courses that we're recommending canceling, which is a good sign, nearly half, and just a slight increase in courses that have an enrollment of less than 20, but we would like to run next year. A lot of decisions are made based on not just the courses and the number of students, but what opportunities those afford our students, whether they're in a pathway, whether they're programmatic or part of a program. And those are really difficult decisions that Ryan and Georgia really work through to support our students. So we see, on the one hand, a decrease in the number that we are recommending for cancellation and a slight increase in those that we're recommending for approval.
All right, so here we go. So, you know, it's funny that the student was talking a lot about career opportunities in the high school, and that's what we're kicking off with. I think the student left, but I want to connect with her so we can talk to her about internship. So internship is a course where students go, they have a workplace, and they're working to check out a career. I was fortunate enough to be able to go with Larry Baca, one of our internship people, to on site. And on the way there, he was talking about a student who wanted to become a doctor, and then went through internship, realized I do not want to become a doctor, and started, and I think he went into like videography / where it meets up with like marketing, which he never would have known before going into internship and, you know, saving the family, like lots of career changes and all that kind of stuff, and the cost of that in college. But I will find that student later. So we are running an additional section of Intro to Teaching at South. They're moving up from from one section to 2 sections. That's a dual credit class, and it's also a part of our educational pathway. At both North and South, we're running an additional section of Business Incubator. Hopefully we'll see everyone at the pitch later this year. And on top of that, we're stacking Accelerator. That's the follow-up class to Incubator. And so in each of one of the sections, Accelerator will also run. And we're excited at North. Our Intro to Culinary classes has increased 175 students. That's not just 175, that's on top of the 200 that we normally have in that class. We are finding creative ways on having 16 sections of Intro to Culinary. But, you know, the students are excited. It's right outside the cafeteria. The facility looks beautiful, so kids are excited. And again, like I mentioned before, internship, we've increased a section at North.
If you're wondering about the impact of the master facility plan.
We're also running environmental sustainability. It's a new course that was approved this fall. We're running on both campuses, and so as we're looking at careers in CTE, we're also increasing our classes for careers in science. Human body systems is running on both sides of town, and the prerequisite for that course of principles of biomedical science is also very popular on both sides of town. And at North, we rebounded our AP Physics C numbers last year during COVID. I think students were concerned about taking an overload in that environment. So our numbers dropped in half last year, and they've rebounded to where they were prior to the pandemic. So we're excited about that.
In the area of English, just a couple of things. We are up in AP Language. That course kind of, Michelle Davis, who was just speaking with you, is one of the teachers of AP Language. And AP Lang and AP Lit kind of ebb and flow a little bit. But next year, AP Lang is going back up. It's always been really healthy on both sides of town. We run for the senior English experience a lot of electives. So the freshmen, sophomore, juniors, they pretty much take English 1, 2, 3, or the honors track with AP Lang. But then at the senior level, they get a lot of choices, and they get to pick 2 semesters for the most part. And so sometimes they pull off of each other, and we have to cancel 1 or 2. But next year at North, for the first time in a while, we're actually running all of the senior English electives, which is a really nice opportunity to be able to give to students. Another outgrowth probably of the master facility plan is that on both sides of town, in the area of fine arts, both jewelry and ceramics have jumped significally for next year. Obviously, all of those spaces are new, and especially the jewelry area is much more developed, I guess I would say, than it was before. And so both of those programs are doing really well. And at North, actually, they're needing to add some staff. Part of their addition is in the area of visual arts. We had gone up a little bit in previous years, and so ours is sustaining at the same rate, but they're going up. And then we will be running music theory for the first time AP in a while. And that's one of the things that was on the under 20 list, but I just was meeting with that teacher today, so she's gearing up for her AP workshop and stuff to get back into that, so that's exciting.
And earlier, support for students also came up. And so just to highlight some things that we're doing to support students, specifically for our language learners, We are adding an EL Math 1 for our language learners at North, and with that outgrowth, next year will be the first year that we're supporting all of our language learners in every graduation requirement at North. So we are excited about that. And then also in special services, we've been working on making sure that as students grow and they're learning their skills, that we appropriately decrease the supports that they're getting in class, because that's our goal. Not for them to become dependent on supports, but to become more independent as they go through school. And so through the work on both sides of town, we've actually reduced the number of students who need supports in our self-contained class, which will then shows a slight growth in our less restrictive environment in our co-taught sections.
And then finally, in world language, at South, we're up a section of French. And French remains, it stayed really healthy. And going back several years, pre-pandemic, we had some different cuts in some of our languages at the middle school and junior high level. So you always have to keep an eye on those languages, especially other than Spanish. And so French, we're really excited that that's gone up. We are running AP German next year on the under 20. That's one of the courses that I probably come every 2 or 3 years, and that happens to be on the under 20, and then it'll jump back up a little bit. We don't have feeder program at all anymore for German, so they all start in the buildings. So that means that it's a little bit harder to get those numbers up. But because we obviously do not want to stop students from finishing that 4th year of the sequence, because a lot of them use the 4-year sequence to not pay for language courses in college, we want to give them the chance to finish that sequence. And then some of you remember that a couple years ago, we kind of got our heritage speaker class, Spanish class, back up and running. And next year, we'll continue to be able to run both levels of that course at South. I think it's one of those courses that's going to ebb and flow at North. It ran this year. And probably the first year you always run a little bit more because all the grades can kind of funnel in. And then once they have the chance to take it, then you have kind of a lull sometimes for a year. But we're excited that that's continuing to do well. All right.
Scott.
All right. You've heard most of it already with the T99 social worker is a 1.0 in our student success coordinators, but the memo that I had kind of breaks down North has the 0.2 increase, like Ryan was mentioning. Both schools are working on moving students into a more inclusive and mainstream environment. South, just due to enrollment, the number went down 1.6 FTE, and then obviously the T99 increase for social work. We've always had a little bit of social work support. Our student population has grown a lot in the last few years, but we've never increased social work there. So that's why we're, asking for the 1.0. But overall, in special services, we're down a 0.4 FTE. And then in CSSS is where we've put the student success coordinators, both at North and South. If you recall, they were paid this year on the grant, and we'll use local funds to cover them for this coming school year.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and I'll be chatting a little bit with you about the dismissals and renewals for next year. The first part of our example or article, I should say, that I share with you has the honorable dismissals, and that's 8 teachers across the district this year. Those are all teachers in current part-time FTE positions who we will not have equivalent FTE for them next year, but we do have intentions to bring them back at a different FTE next year. So that's why they are honorable dismissals. We're planning to return them next year. Next group is for just dismissals. Those are teachers that are in situations where they took over later in the year, typically for leaves of absences, and so someone else is returning next year to take back over the position that they maybe had vacated. So those individuals, then we don't have a place for them for next year. So I believe there's 4 of those individuals for next year. Then there's a very lengthy list of names broken down by year that follows that part of my report, and that includes all of these teachers in various years here of their non-tenure status who are being recommended for renewal. And upon your approval of that, I'll be visiting with those teachers later on to have them sign their contracts, which I'm sure they will be very excited about that. And then in addition to the articles there as well are the exhibits and the resolutions related to those actions. So the copies of the letters those staff members will receive, as well as just some formal documents that, you know, make the process rounded out and official for everyone. So thank you.
Okay, that's all of it. What questions do you have?
Oh, I have one question. Okay. About the curriculum, courses recommended for cancellation. We're getting rid of managerial accounting honors at North, and we're adding managerial accounting non-honors at South. Is there any thought in the future, if we have enough students who are interested, where we would somehow, like even if one side of town remoted in for the class, so that we could offer more?
Yeah, I mean, we do talk about that, especially, I think, more so now than we ever used to in the past, now that we've done more things online, and it's just a little bit more complicated than it sounds. We used to, when I was world language chair, you know, I don't remember, 15, 16 years ago, for several years, that's how we would run French 5 and Spanish 5. We had what we called the digital learning room in each building. They had these giant TVs, and kids would sit in there, and the kids at the other school would be up on the screen, and the teacher would be in one building, and we would pony papers back and forth, and, you know, because that's what we did, literally. It came in the pony, and but you still have to have an adult in there supervising the students who are in there. There's like a lot of logistical pieces, and kids, I think, you know, back then it was something totally strange to them to do. So getting kids to really buy in and get, you know, engage in it was sometimes difficult, much more difficult, and more difficult for the teachers. I think it might be something worth trying down the road. I think this year, anytime you mention anything virtual or online, kids are like, oh, no.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really valid question, and we talk every year about that option, about traveling, about, you know, different things like that. The traveling's really hard because you have to have the transportation and you have to give up an extra period of your day. But Gina and Ryan and I regularly talk about those types of options and whether or not we should try to offer them for various things. So I think it's a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. All right. So over the course of this year, when we talk about, you just heard about strategic planning and goal setting. One of the things that we talked about in our administrative goal planning for this year was coming off of the pandemic and knowing that there was an increase of failures, was responding to those, but also continuing down our pathway of just trying to eliminate as many failures as possible, not by lowering standards, but by increasing support. And Georgia and Ryan were tasked with it, we're tasked with this year. So I thought it'd be appropriate at this point, as we're talking about both strategic planning and our staffing and everything else at this point of the year, for them to share some of what we've done this year.
All right. So let me begin on the behalf of both Ryan and I by saying this: we're here representing 400 people in the building that actually did the heavy lifting on this. So yes, we are going to talk about how we tried to lead some of the process, but really it's the department chairs and the classroom teachers that have really done the lion's share of the work to make this happen. So we feel like, you know, the other 400 people are represented here with us tonight. Every year we get data on what we call freshmen on track. So the state shares with us what % of our freshmen are on track. And the state defines that as as a freshman, you earned at least 5 credits, and you basically passed all of your core classes. You could fail one semester of a core, but that's it. So if you happen to fail freshman math the whole year, or global connections, or English, etc., then you're not on track. Even if you passed, you can't pass all the cores, I don't think, without earning 5 credits. It would be tough, but you have to have 5 credits as well. So District 99, both schools historically have a high rate of freshmen being on track, but we know how important the freshman year is. So any freshman who's not on track is something that we want to be concerned with. And it will come as no surprise to most of you probably that after last year, when we got our numbers, they had gone down. We did not have as high of numbers of freshmen on track. So, as Hank said, we started looking at that. Ryan and I broke down some of the data. We took, Gina's office gets all of that specific information from the state. So we took that and we looked at it, we shared it with our leadership teams in an effort to really try to make that a focus of our work this year. So on this slide, you'll see some information from both buildings. And when the state sent us our information at South last year, we're on the right there, we had 76 freshmen who were considered not on track at the end of the 2021 school year. So by the time school started in the fall of 2021, we were at 64, and there's a combination of reasons. One is summer school, and the other is kids leave. Kids come and go, especially in the summer, and so a combination of kids possibly moving and then kids regaining credits in summer school put us at 64 kids. And then at the end of first semester, we were at 60 at South, which does not sound like a huge change, but one thing that's really important, there's a couple things that are really important. One is that it takes a long time, especially if you fail multiple classes, it takes a long time to get back on track, because summer there's 2 semesters, so you can regain 1 credit in the summer, and then we don't hold kids back per se the next year. So if you're a sophomore, you're going to take U.S. history. There are some things you can't just jump ahead, but for the most part, you're going to take English 2, you're going to take U.S. history, you're going to take a sophomore course load, and then you might have 1 or 2 less electives in order to try to make up some of what you didn't pass. But it takes time, and because of the situation last year, there were more kids that seemed to have more failures. So it wasn't like I just failed 1 semester of math. We had some kids that failed multiple classes. So it takes some time. But there's some really good news there, which is looking at the end of semester 1, half of the 64 that we started the year with passed everything first semester. And I've been through all of those transcripts multiple times. And actually a lot of them didn't just pass, they did really well in their classes. So it's clear that being back in a much more normal year, face-to-face with the teachers and the supports really, really helped. And then the last number there is there are 12 kids that if they pass what they're in right now, what they're trying to recover this semester, will then be back on track by the end of this semester too. So we're definitely making some progress there.
Yeah, North's numbers are very similar in that we started with 42. We went down to 32. We had some students that were outplaced, some students that have moved. And then by the fall, we were at 30. We had 8 students who regained their credits through summer school. So that helped. The state doesn't recognize that right away. So, officially our number doesn't change till later, but like internal tracking, we know that was where we're at. Also, we had 20 of our 30 students who did not receive a D or an F in any of their courses first semester, which is exciting. And we'll have 8 more that will be back on track. Right now, some of them are doubled up in science and in social studies. We have a young person who's doubled up in English and science and social studies, and he's passing all of them, which is great. But as we talked about earlier, we want students to be able to also, pursue their passions and find, a career. So, we're hoping to help them make sure that they're not making those, have those struggles again later, so that they can continue to take some courses that they want to take, not the ones that they have to take. If we move to the next slide, we'll just talk a little bit about what we've been doing. Maybe Hank has told you that at his opening, he talked about carrying the load, right? That many hands make light work. And that when we look at students who are struggling in school, it is not just the teacher, it is not just the chair, it's not just the building administration, it's everyone. It's families, it's students, it's district administrators. We all have to work together. And so everyone kind of took some of their frustration, wrote it down on a slip of paper. We all threw it into the aisles, and we collected it. Hank could probably go to his office and pull out the suitcase as a reminder that he is helping us carry our load. And so when we looked at the freshman not on track data, George and I did a lot of thinking about how can we put a face to the students, right? It's easy to think about the students as just data, like that prior slide. We did it slightly different at both campuses, but trying to put the face to it. At North, we did an activity where, we had counselors write down some things beyond, like what are their dreams? Like what do they want to do for a living? What are some hobbies that they had? South did, while doing a different activity, did something similar. How do we make sure that before we look at the data, we know that these are kids who struggled last year, not just numbers that we're trying to correct. So that helped kind of frame our larger talk about students who struggled. And then we started talking with the staff about how do we create partnerships, right, with Calling Home. It's not just letting parents know that a student's failing your class, but how do you have conversations that you build those partnerships? They did a lot of work in their course teams under their department chairs to talk about how do we support as a team? What are the tier 1 classroom interventions for academics that we do as a team? We also tried to promote the awareness of the interventions that are that we already have built in our system, office hours, that while students were reluctant to go to office hours and be in the waiting room online, you can go to office hours, and you see a lot of students at both schools going before school or after school for office hours. We also have academic resource, we have paper, and we can give you stats on paper. Sometimes whole classes will they turn their paper into paper.com and they get feedback from a teacher. We also have a lot of use of that for students, really late at night in math and science. And then also our Strive program and our NHS tutors have continued. And so as we talk about interventions, it's not just about sending a note to CSSS, but what are we doing in the classroom academically? How are we communicating? And also how are we teaching those soft skills, whether or not it's organization or self-advocacy, and making sure that kids are reflecting on what they're doing to make sure that they're staying on track.
A few of the other interventions, you've heard the Student Success Coordinator mentioned a couple times tonight. That's been a really, really helpful position. Obviously, last year they were working a lot with families when kids were at home and whatnot. But now that kids are with us, they're still constantly working with families, with kids, with some of our interventionists in the building to really support kids. Also, over the past few years, you've probably heard about our common experience work. So that work is really moving down the road, and we're getting closer to the end. I say that's not a great word for it because there's really never an end, but of that work. And so as a part of that work, eliminating zeros from the grade books, designing and implementing reassessment policies, late work policies, putting limitations on homework, weighting, all of those things make a difference when you look at grading and assessment practices as well. And then finally, we had a great tool that Ryan's going to show in a second, developed by Jim Struck here at the ASC and Keith Dvorkin, one of our teachers that has time to work with data, that has really allowed us in a whole new way to drill, and in our department chairs and teachers, to drill down on student data and look at trends and see across courses, and teachers can see for themselves their own data, how kids are doing across the board in classes.
So if you go to the next slide, we just have a graphic of what the tool looks like. I blocked out the student data. That's that big black square there. But when I was talking with Keith and Jim, one of the things that we talked about was the reason that schools don't use data to track interventions as regular as they need to is because it's hard to digest. Not everyone is a data person. How do I draw the data? How do I manage the data? How do I ask the questions that lead to the questions that answer the questions that I need to know about the data? And so George and I brainstormed some things that we wanted to have sort of at our department chair's fingertips, not as a sort of gotcha, like look, check each teacher and see how many Fs there are in that class. It's more so like, are we seeing any trends? Do we see anything across the sophomore class? Is there something across a department? Is there something at a time of year? And so we had him, Jim and Keith, kind of break down this tool, and you can see that, you know, we can divide it by building. I can do it by course. We can do it by federal race and ethnicity score. We can look at whether or not they have an IEP, whether a free induced lunch. And so we can do any kind of combination that we want as we're asking the questions. We can just look at the latest report. We can look at trends of a class over days. We could pull up athletes. And also, as we started using it, people started asking for more drop downs, which was great because then they were asking questions that they wanted to know the answer to. So we did add in gender. I think we added in counselor because the counselors wanted to be able to pull up their own data. We added our EL students. And so we've had a lot of success with department chairs then being able to look at trends with their teams and taking some of the gotcha feeling that might come out of it and have a more supportive conversation of what are we doing together to make sure all students are being successful. So as a result of that, on the next slide, you can see the reduction in the failure data from our freshman class. So in the fall of 2020, there were 39 students at North that comprised 93 Fs, which is about 7.5% of the freshman class. And surprisingly, you'd think that the first semester there would be more struggle in getting used to that environment. It actually wasn't. It was second semester when we were actually going back and forth between a hybrid and remote setting. And so we had 51 students with 109 Fs, which is about 9.8% of the class. And those data, that is why our freshman not on track data went up. But exciting, in one semester with the work, we went down to 17 students that comprised of 34 Fs in the freshman class, which is a 3.2%. And again, that is the staff working together and looking at numbers, not just a feeling of what might be happening. And so we're really proud of the work that the staff did to reduce that number.
And on the south side, I will comment a couple things. My colleague who retired last year, Dr. Walshrock, some of you probably know him. He started keeping freshman failure rates at South by semester back in 2002, 2003. So 20 years ago, I have data that goes back. And at that point, we were running around 15 to 19% a semester. And so we began doing some targeted, after we had a few years worth of data, we started doing some targeted work back then. I couldn't even remember all that it was. I was a department chair at the time. But we brought those numbers down, and in the 9-10 school year, we happened to see a major drop. And that year, we got down to 8%, which was by far the lowest we had ever been. And that was the only time we hit 8%. And since that time, it's always hovered around 9, 10, 11, 12, never got back up where it was in the early 2000s until the pandemic. So you can see there that same story as North. First semester, which was almost all remote, was actually turned out to be a little bit lower than second semester. So first semester, we had 112 students accumulate 274 Fs, which put us back up at 16%. And then we were at 17% the second semester. But this fall, we were down to 57 students with 91 Fs. And at 9%, which is the lowest we've ever been except for that 1 year in 9-10. So obviously there's room for improvement, but it's pretty exciting to drop that number almost in half. So that's where we're at right now.
All right, so questions for Georgia or Ryan? Thank you for all of your work, and thank you to the work of everybody you lead. All right, hybrid block schedule. As the board knows, this is an action item later this evening. We had a 90-minute discussion on this 2 weeks ago, so I was hoping not to replicate that whole conversation with the board. But I did want to, knowing that you were going to hear about the strategic plan this evening, I did want to take an opportunity to point out some crossovers and how important this new block schedule is to accomplishing the directions that are in the strategic plan. One of the things you saw in that strategic plan tonight are some core themes that ran through it was ensuring that things happen, not leaving it to chance, right? Being intentional about what we do, and that there's tier 1 supports, that every student gets a same basic baseline set of skills. The schedule that we're producing through that access period and through that resource period are where we create time to do those things. My grandfather always used to tell me, you show what is important to you by where you spend your time, because the one thing in your life you can never get more of is time. So never call up Grandpa and tell him you didn't have time to call him. But one of the things, the essential thing that we're doing in this schedule is creating space and time for all of these things that you heard about tonight to actually occur, and not leave it to chance that they occur, but program them in. As Gina discussed with you at our last meeting, all of the different things that fit in there. So some key pieces that you heard tonight. Actively asking for information beyond college. These are all things that are built into this access and resource period. Pathways, internships, meeting with employers, businesses in the community. The idea of a growth continuum, that we're building in lessons and are being intentional about student accountability and resiliency, and building in time for social emotional supports. That there's post-secondary planning occurring during this time, and that we can help our students see beyond graduation to post-secondary and life kind of opportunities that are going to be there, and that students engage actively in that rather than being invited to come during that time. We're building it in. They're going to do this, right? We're not leaving it to chance. That we talk about school life balance and how to manage their time and executive functioning and those kinds of things. How to better live in harmony between your responsibilities and the things that are driving your time. That we are creating time for students to work together and to know one another, and for adults to know what they're doing and want to do. The idea of you're going to stack year after year with that same teacher in access, that will get this opportunity to see you grow over time and to help shape that growth. And really trying to build those opportunities so students know for the rest of their life that they're both going to be learning and they're both going to be working, and it doesn't matter what order those things occur in. But they're going to be doing those, all right? That's the goal of making it through high school and going on in your life, all right? So we talked a lot last time about this. Gene and I didn't bring any other greater presentation than that. Just, we're here to answer any of your last minute questions that you have before we ask the question later on in the board meeting. I'll just open the floor up for, are there any last minute things that Gene and I can answer for you?
I just worry that there's too much downtime. It just, having a senior next year, she's already expressed, you know, that she's going to aim for a 6th period lunch and an 8th period study hall. And she can leave at 1:30 on Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah, I don't know if that opportunity is going to present itself.
I understand, but I mean, that's her vision of, you know, what this looks like.
I think it's a misconception that there's going to be a lot of downtime, because we talked about it last time, that Monday, Tuesday, Friday are
the same.
just like they are now.
Except that really with, you know, like that's the starting at 8:20 instead of 8 o'clock is sort of, you know, like if you looked at it as right now, they lose an hour and 20 minutes or whatever of instruction on Mondays because they come in late.
That offsets.
That
right?
offsets.
Correct.
But
so on the block day,
chunk of the resource.
right, but remember on the block day, that lunch period that falls in 7th and 8th period is a shorter lunch period.
The lunch
than
period
what they get.
is, but the resource.
Correct, but that's where they get that. So there's 2 shorter lunch periods and 1 longer resource period, of which we're taking half of it, right? So it's a shorter lunch period. Then you get some of that time back in the resource period. It's close to how it averages out. It's a restructuring of that time. And yes, it's reblocked in different ways, but it's not necessarily an aggregate significant change. It's a structural change.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt. Could you just finish your thought? Because the conversation, I kind of like lost track of what you were trying to say to begin with, Jenny.
Let's just say, so also let's say the lunch is, you're like in thirds and that, so you might have the first sort of segment, the second or the third. So let's say you have the third, and then you have resource.
Sure.
You know, like then you're done.
But you're not, because you would have your lunch period, then you would go to the instructional activity for the first half of resource. Then the second half of resource, you would have time.
So there's juniors and seniors are gonna be held to having to go to an instructional activity.
Yeah.
And not just leave.
Well, it'll be a mix. It'll be a mix. There'll be some days where they could just leave, but there's going to be days where there's going to be required instructional activities as well. And it's not every senior, right?
No,
It's
but
seniors
then, I
in
mean,
good
it's also-
standing.
Yeah, I
With
know.
parental permission, with transportation, with all of those things, which students can do right now, every 8th period of the day.
Yeah.
Right, it's just restructured into how it falls over the flow of the week. But right now, we have seniors that can leave 8th period, and we've
Yeah.
always had that, right?
Yeah, and, or come in after first
Correct, or
period.
come in late. So it doesn't.
I guess it sort of falls maybe to the student that you certainly, I sort of feel like, what if the elective is a study hall, or is that for sure?
Oh, it could happen, yeah.
Yeah, so then you
I mean, it
really
happens
have-
now though, but you look at it over the course of the week rather than a single day, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, you'll have 2 days with longer blocks of time, and those, if a student doesn't have something scheduled into that time, that's a longer chunk of time where that occurs. But when you look at the other way, now this is only happening 4 days a week rather than 5 days a week. So it's a restructuring of similar time.
Is it is it 50-50 that they might have some, I mean, I guess it's like.
Every
what if-
student's schedule is unique to
Yeah,
them.
but I mean, what if they have, you're planning, like, what if that opportunities only once or twice a month, or, you know, I mean, is it good, is the objective to
I'll let you speak to
keep
the
them
leading
there,
those.
or to?
We're still working on resource in terms of the actual schedule. Whether or not we'll have opportunities every single week, probably not, but we're not looking at something that's once a month.
Okay.
Right, so, and we have a lot of different suggestions. It's one of the same issues we're running into with access, which is everything's important, which it is, and much of it needs to occur in the beginning of the school year. So a lot of it's a little bit of balancing.
Are you following a model that we could look at, like, you know, this school does this, go see what they're, you know, because I know a lot of schools that do a formal block schedule, you know, like the A and the B, and you can, you know, take a class in a semester, a year class in a semester.
And that's not what we're talking about doing.
No, but I have not heard of a lot of schools.
Yes, we've talked to other schools that have similar programming. So, for example, the main schools, Island Park, Deerfield, Evanston, Naperville has a similar access
They have
program.
access, yeah.
So, yeah, we've talked to other schools in the area that have done similar type programming. You know, and it's not about the we understand how the structure is. Right now, it's now to Gina sorting out what do we put in there and what do we eliminate, because the list of things, as you heard tonight during strategic planning, the list of things that we would love to do in that is much greater than the number of spaces that we have. Plus, we hear from students, as students talk about their time, that they would like some time to catch up and to get help. And, you know, sometimes it is to decompress, you know, and that, that we offer opportunities for those things that students are at, that we hear their voice, and we provide some of those opportunities over the course of a semester as well, that they could go make up a test during that amount of time rather than before school or after school, right? So it's a balancing of all of these competing demands to put it, it's not for a lack of things to put in this space. It's narrowing down the field and making sure that the right things are scheduled in there over the course of the year.
So can I just build on your question for a moment? So to Jenny's point, I know what I've read in the literature, which I've not done an exhaustive review of the literature, but I've read multiple articles about this. But from our neighboring schools, what have been the biggest hurdles, roadblocks, negative consequences of going to this kind of schedule? Do we have a sense from them?
Yeah, the biggest thing is making the change without having a plan where the students are going to go, is what we've heard. So part of the planning for access, as we shared with you last time, is that students will all have a landing spot where they start from. And that is something that we've heard from the other schools, that if you just leave it to chance and you just hope that kids are going to go to the right places, that, you know, they might just choose to go hang out in the commons instead, right? That we're intentional, and that was one of the words I used, about making sure that students go get help, or invited in to get help, or learn how to advocate to go get the help that they need during that time, and it's structured appropriately. And that if a student can't structure it, we help them structure it, right? And that's really what we've heard, you know, is the downside from other schools. The other thing was just releasing students into it without any prep work leading up to it. And in the plan that they're putting together, like the first 3 or 4 access periods, maybe even more than that, first 6, are all built around navigating this new schedule and this new structure, making sure that students are set up to be successful in the new schedule, not leaving it to chance that they'll figure it out, right? That we teach them the expectations and how to pull the levers of it to help them be successful in the new schedule.
Well, don't you think that this is an opportunity for, let's say a student is having problems in math, for that teacher, and that teacher knows the kids that are having problems, and say, you know, either send them a note or ask them in class, hey, you know what, I've got my access period at Thursday at 8th period.
Well, they're all free at the same time.
All right, well.
All students and teachers are free at access.
Right, but, you know, maybe they have other students coming on Wednesday, and say, Thursday, why don't you come see me at, you know, this amount of time, and we can go over it a little bit and help you. And so it's an opportunity, not for the kids always to ask for help, but also for teachers to ask for them to come and see them and work with them. And I think that that's what's really a big advantage. And that doesn't mean, you know, just the kids that need help, but all the kids can come and talk to their teachers.
Right.
So,
In the last teacher's contract, we really pushed hard for student support, right? So you see a combination of things here with office hours, which you heard about tonight, and us taking advantage of that and sending students to those office hours.
right.
Part of that is access, part of that is resource, right? There are all of these things. It's putting the late starts back in the day to give students more time to start their day every day. That's part of a tier one, a support that goes to all students, because we know that that makes a difference for high school kids, right? So this schedule is really built around getting students what they need in both just general tier one supports, things that every student should get, and then the specific supports that each individual student needs.
Mhm.
This is how we take District 99 from an environment that has conditions in which students can succeed to an environment in which we ensure that every student has been set up to succeed. How do we take this next step in that strategic plan? It's this type of a schedule that allows us to do that. Without that, you're asking for District 99 to ramp up and go to the next level in education and not providing us the time or resources or structure to make those changes, right? And the schedule we're under is the same schedule that students in the 70s went to school. School's changed a little bit since the 70s, right? So we need a schedule that allows us to catch up with the expectations of teaching and learning that have developed over the last 40, 50 years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've updated our facilities, we've updated our programming, our curriculum, our supports. The last thing that we really need to update is our schedule to take advantage of all of these things that we've put in as a school district to support our kids.
And I think it's important for our students to learn how to do that. You know, some of them might be shy and you know, nervous about going to see their teacher, but if their teachers communicated with them and talked to them about things, they're much more open to come and get the help that they need. And I think that's really important.
And the final thing I will add is a reminder that we are starting with program evaluation in mind, right? That there will be a third-party evaluator evaluating this for the next 2 years, providing feedback to the administration, the board, and the public about are we being successful in this, and if not, then you should expect the administration to be responding to the gaps that we're finding in that. But we're not gonna it's not gonna be like, wait a year and then find out if it worked. You're gonna find out all along how we're doing, and assuming the board approves it later tonight, we have our kickoff meeting for that program evaluation on Friday of this week. So, you know, we will get underway with that immediately.
And I kind of want to go off something Jenny said and something Joanna said last time. And that is the kids who fall through the cracks. Who is accountable to make sure that the children the students who struggle with this, or the teachers who struggle with this, are getting what they need, are getting to the access?
All of us, but you helped us with resources with adding Ryan as Director of Student Experience at the district office. You've added student success coordinators tonight that help with that, interventionists. The board has added additional social work support, and all the counseling and support services additions over the last 5 years. The board has built the team of resources to be here to make sure that students, yes, there will be students that fall through the crack, but we catch them and we intervene rather than, once again, leaving it up to chance that things will happen. That's why I thought it was essential tonight for you to see that strategic response to failures. That's not letting kids slip through the cracks, right?
I think, you know, all the things that you're planning to put into place, all these supports, there will be kids who fall through the cracks. It's inevitable. And I can see all the benefits of this. a little bit the timing is bothering me, and I know how you feel about you, now is the best time. But the reality is, the kids who are seniors, right, or going to be seniors, have gone through some really stressful stuff. They've been through COVID and coming back and going back and forth, and I go, is this the appropriate time to do it? I know you're eager
Yes.
to get this going. I know.
The
Well, I knew
appropriate
what the
time to do
answer
it
was
would have
gonna
been
be.
4 years ago
Yes,
before the
I know.
pandemic showed up, right?
But I do feel like those kids, they, you said the last time, we shouldn't do it, we shouldn't have had them bear the brunt of COVID, we shouldn't have done it. And I feel like we might be doing it on the backs of these seniors. That's how
I understand that it's a change. First of all, a student's schedule in high school, changes every year.
It does.
Right? And if we would have had this schedule in place before the pandemic, this year would have gone better. Right? The things that Ryan and Georgia showed up to talk about, that we had to fit these supports and, take a structure of a schedule that's not built to necessarily be adaptive and support kids. They talked about how they had to change kids' schedules and summer school, and they didn't even talk about virtual options that they did with kids, and all of those things don't fit into the schedules we have it now, where next year's schedule is built for that. It's built to take that on. So when we talk about supporting kids, we're still supporting kids. The pandemic's still going on. Kids are still responding to it, or still stressed, or still coming back from it. This is the schedule that helps us finish that comeback, where the current schedule we have now doesn't create any more space to do things that much differently than what we do now.
I might offer too that the 75% of the students that go on to college, those seniors, instead of going from what we're doing right now to all of a sudden getting thrown into college, where every day, every semester changes completely. This is a transition for them. This is instead of going from a place where everything is just so regimented and structured to now they figure it all out. This is a way for them
Not
to
just
gain a
college
little
either,
bit more.
Mike. The world of work has changed, we all
Sure.
know as well, and students, workers, when we talk with our employers in the community, they talk about they need to know how to manage their time. They need to know how to advocate for themselves. They need to know how to work with others. It's this whole list of skills that's not any different than what students that go to college need to be able to do for themselves either.
So, I like Joanna. I am concerned about the timing. The second thing is, the argument is, in one breath we're saying, is to get them ready for the world, but actually, when we first talked about this, we talked about it being to lessen some stress, where it would be an opportunity for them to get kind of almost to slow things down a little bit, to give them a time to study, to give them a time to take a breath. But the opposite argument of that is not how the world looks, right? So you just get in there, you have to, kind of make it happen. So I guess I am concerned about the timing of this. The other thing is, and I know I've seen some data, but I just don't feel like I've seen, and I know the administration makes the decisions, but just the support of the teachers, what are the students as a whole feeling? How are they feeling about something like this? Do we feel like we have majority buy-in from both perspectives, the staff, administration,
The
and
staff
students?
negotiated it as part of their contract the last time. So the teachers agreed to it as part of their contract negotiation. So the staff as a group has voted to support this change. Students, it's mixed. And part of it is mixed because they lived through a pandemic. And a lot of students, when I meet with them one-on-one, think that this will feel like it did to some extent when they were in the pandemic. And I can't change that until they live it, right? And it's hard for students to understand it until they've lived through it. But in talking to schools from other districts that have recently made this change, it's positive in all kinds of ways, like what you talked about, in stress levels for students, in anxiety levels, in getting the support that they need. And just because we lower stress doesn't mean you eliminate stress at school. There's a healthy amount of stress within schools, but you need to provide time and space for students to deal with that and to get support through it. And right now, we leave that way too much on the student shoulders to advocate for themselves and not creating time in the day to address those concerns.
So when you say in the contract, help me walk through that, they agreed to it. Is it one of those things where to be in the contract, you have to agree to it, or they had an option to agree or disagree to it?
They voted on a contract which included a change to a hybrid schedule.
Okay, I
That
just
they-
want to
they
be
would
sure I
support that
understand
change.
when we say that language, because I'm, that I understand what that means. Okay.
Because of but it was because of the changes in time for professional development and some of the changes for, it wasn't that they saw this and said, oh, yes, I agree to this. It was because of tweaking of time.
Correct. It's a change in working conditions. Yeah.
And working conditions. So
Yeah.
it wasn't that they saw this and it was a done deal. It was.
No.
It was
That's
in
what
there
they
with
agreed
a
to,
whole bunch of other
conceptually.
stuff that they
Yeah.
had to make a decision on. This happened to be in there. Okay.
Correct.
On the concerns over the timing, so you would be less concerned if we waited a year?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Kind of what I said about senior class. The upcoming senior class has been through 2 years of this COVID and the hybrid and all that, and it's been stressful. And we said at that meeting that, well, we don't want to, put it on the back of those kids, this whole burden. So why are we adding this
So
additional stress
If you
this
stay in the
year?
8-period day, you're putting it on the back of kids because you're not creating the time to give them what they need. This
is how I
this
see it.
schedule
That's the way I
takes
see
it off the back of kids and makes us more actively involved and supportive in giving kids what they need. And don't think that going back to school next year is not a change, right? It's no masks. It's the pandemic is changing. The world is changing. Like next year will not be, 2019, right? Next year will be 2022, 2023, and it's going to be a new year one way or another.
But it's going back to what we were more familiar with as a community school, no mask, no pandemic. It's going back what we were familiar with, right?
Those students lived it for
That's right.
2/3 of a school year. They will never, next year's seniors, every year will have been different for them. They left school on March 13th, 2019, their freshman year. Again, right? And then they had last year, which was a mess.
Right.
And then they had this year, which is uncertainty with COVID for the whole year and masks and different activities and all of those kinds of things. Next year, regardless of what we go back to, will be a change from the last 3 years. This is a change for the better. Change for the past is a change for the past. It's a change next year regardless. This is how we support our kids coming back next year. Not by going back to what we did in 2018. The world was very different in 2018. This is the schedule that we need to support kids in 2022.
Yeah, because you've got 5 days of Monday, Tuesday, Friday. So you've got no opportunity for the kids to really, except maybe during their lunch hours, or lunch hours, well,
Lunch hour.
that's a fallacy. But during their lunch, to go get resource or to get assistance. I mean, that's not much time because they still have to eat. And we want them to eat because I think they're better students when they eat. But this at least gives them the opportunities to get help or resources or, maybe work on their FAFSA.
I just worry that it's not something they need every week.
But this builds in a consistent flow.
It does.
When we talk about the stress and consistency, I know people are like, oh, it changes now on Wednesday and Thursday, they're different. What you're looking at is a consistent flow from week to week. We have less modified weeks because things like PBIS lessons and all of those things that happen over the course of the week are now built in, or the course, week by week, where you end up with all these different schedules. You start to build in some consistency. Monday's Monday, Tuesday's Tuesday, and you start to get into a flow of this as a student that there really is some huge benefits that come because of that.
When we look at lessons learned from the pandemic, I look at this as a response to that, and we've definitely learned a lot about what students' needs are. And I think that this is one of the way that we address that. And we're talking 2 days of the week, right?
You're talking about modifying one class period
right.
for each class.
Right.
I'd like to kind of hear from our students and see what.
They love it when you put them on the spot like this.
I know.
It wasn't me.
I know.
Just kind of move over here.
Well, I just
And I'm leaving.
fell to the bottom of the pile.
Before we put them on the spot, can I just say that I struggled with the timing myself. I was like, so much. But if it doesn't happen this year, it's gonna happen
I
next
know
year.
it's inevitable.
And those kids have had they'll have had a different year every year, because they'll have had
changes.
junior high.
Sorry.
And then if we're really gonna, if we don't, in order to not really impact anybody who's lived through COVID, we would have to wait 4 years to institute
No,
this.
you'd probably have to wait 12.
Yeah.
I think that's true. It's something, I think the benefit I see in this is the longevity of it. And so, in my mind, it is those kids that are in this for a year that are kind of going to be the guinea pig, let's see if it works. Again, this is that same class. I may or
But
may
you're
not
never
have a
gonna
kid
get-
in that class.
But you're never going to get.
It's inevitable, we're gonna go this way. But I feel that, I lost my train of thought for a minute. I feel like there, and it's inevitable that some kids are gonna fall through the cracks anyway. And we're using all these words, we're going to assure that these kids are going to get those self-advocacy skills and be taking care of themselves. Well,
I think we're ensuring that they get the opportunity
the
to be
opportunity.
taught.
But the
Yes.
thing is, not everyone matures at the same rate. There are gonna be a lot of kids that aren't gonna be able to do it. And we're gonna be unable to remove a lot of the constraints that they have that are outside the school, which are often even more affect these students' performance. I mean, it's wonderful when kids have parents that are totally supportive and encourage them to get grades and they don't have all those outside constraints. But when you have a student like that, this is gonna be really difficult for them, even more. And what do you do about the unmotivated? I don't know.
But that's why it's built this way. This is why you have the same access teacher year after year. This is why the programming is developed by grade level, right? So that the students are getting the appropriate material for the, at least at the grade level they're at. They're now with a teacher that has a small number of students, that's keeping an eye out for them, that's reminding them what the next day is, that reminds them what access is the next time when they come back, that's communicating with them that way, so that there's less of a chance for a student to fall through a crack, right? If you're in this small group of 10 to 15 students with an access teacher that's with you for 4 years.
And that access teacher is accountable as a student for not succeeding.
Right, they're working with those students year after year. That's who's gonna see if a student, that's another set of eyes, not the only set of eyes, but it's another set of eyes to catch if they're falling through the cracks. But we have all of these other supports going on as well, like you saw that tonight with the response to failures. It's just one example of all of the other pieces that are there. Like I said, the board has added CSSS support so that a counselor doesn't have to look at as many students, right? Now you're building the tier 1 interventions into the class, so now you're not duplicating resources. So hopefully there's more time there to monitor students. We'll go back to, you've added all of the resources as a school district to make sure that this is successful. Now is the time to act and take that next step. And I know it's change, and change is hard, and there's never a good time for change. The good time for this change would have been 4 years ago before a pandemic showed up, but none of us knew that was coming, and all of our resources weren't here at that time.
Our facilities weren't really.
And our facilities couldn't support it at that time. So, as I've said before, if our district could have made this change 20 years ago, it would have. There was plans back 20 years ago before I think Mark's the only one at the table that was around at that time. But there were committees looking to make this change 2 decades ago, and the facilities and the sports weren't there to do it. Everything you have done as a board for a decade to get to this point has led to here. Not making this change stops short of all of that work and is a disservice to our students. That's how I feel about this.
I feel, the easy thing to do would have been to not even explore this, right? If you're just going through the motion, I mean, who's going to criticize you for just doing what you've been doing? Everyone else is doing that, right? That's the way we've done it, right? But Hank, when previous board hired you, a couple of us were part of that. You know, we wanted a superintendent who was going to not maintain status quo, but look at how we do things and how can we do things better and how can we improve. And this is exactly the kind of thing that I hoped for and expected from your leadership. And, you know, quite frankly, this is something that we, you know, with the master facility plan, this was something that we knew we were going to be able to do this with that. And the discussions about this started quite a while ago. So for anybody suggesting that this is a last minute thing, or, you know, we haven't been fully transparent, they just haven't been following along. Certainly COVID caused us to delay what we wanted to do, right? Because the schedule was this year was going to start this. That was the hope.
That was the plan.
You know, or long range planning. And we had to pull off that in order to you know, deal with the matter at hand. And we at least had an experience that we could learn some things from to help inform this, to make it even more hopefully successful. You can't do something new without there being any risk at all, right? So we accept that things may not be wonderful.
Yeah, I've read a lot of literature, and the abundance of it really does point to this, that this is the way that we should go. But I still am concerned about that. For me, it's the timing, and I don't know if I'm always this last minute, I'm thinking I might vote. But you know, I still can't, you know, help but not think about some children this is not gonna be the best thing for them. But I do know that in the long run, this is gonna be better for more students, so.
Well, that's what makes you a great school board member.
There's a lot of students right now that our current schedule isn't serving them.
Oh, I know that.
Right?
I know that.
I think this will serve more of our students well than our current schedule does.
This is a thoughtful board. I mean, we're thinking about all of the possibilities, right?
Oh, yeah,
We're
I've never done so much thinking as on this board.
Sure.
And this idea, though, of accepting the fact that there are always students who are going to fall through the cracks, what I'm hearing, and it's not just Hank that's working on this, it's Gina and hundreds and hundreds of other people are working on this.
Certainly.
You just represent it.
Correct.
Not just, but you know what I mean. Is that this acceptance that there are always going to be students that fall through the crack is I don't think, is a good thing for us to embrace.
And I'm not accepting that.
Yes, and so this is an attempt, that's my point, this is an attempt to identify students who heretofore would have fallen through the cracks and not let them fall through the cracks, which is what we've been saying for a very long time.
Can we ask you?
Of course.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, is there anything you'd like to offer?
Yeah, of course. Open that can of worms.
I think your concern about the timing is very fair, and like you're basing it off the senior class, which as seniors this year, definitely consider it. But there's always going to be that next senior class that you don't want to mess with.
Absolutely.
So like if you're pushing it back this year because of next year's seniors, well, what about next year's juniors? Then it's going to be messed up their senior year. So I don't really think you can base it off of the class. I know looking at it, I was a little bit iffy at first. You know, my learning style, I didn't know if it would best suit me. But being a senior who's going to college next year, you know, visiting the colleges and hearing about their schedules, this closely resembles that. They don't have 8-period days. You have to learn how to manage your time, and you have longer classes. So I think the block days and having that mix is definitely the best of both worlds, and you're getting your students ready for what comes next if they do choose to go to college. And of course, not like Dr. Thiele said, one schedule isn't going to work for everyone. But again, this is the best of both worlds. So I definitely think it'll work. And having that access period to do those like Mustang Way and Positively North lessons instead of taking time away from your core classes. I know personally math gets shortened, and then you have all your other classes are shortened, so just having that built-in time so you still have your same length of classes is definitely going to be beneficial for the students.
Okay. I think Scarlett said it really well, and I think it's like with a lot of situations, you're never going to make everybody happy, right? I think that's something that we need to understand, and I think that as I've sat on the board, I've gotten to understand the schedule more fully than our actual students. So I think that I would look at this and I would be like, I don't know what that means necessarily, but I do. And I think that I know you're not going to leave them up to their own defenses once it is in place. Like I know Gina and Dr. Thiele, you were saying how those first few access sections will be talking them through and making sure they can understand and process how this new schedule will work. And I think it's going to be beneficial. I think it'll be less stress. But I also do understand, Sherelle and Joanna, your guys' concern. I was talking to a junior today, and she comes up to me and she says, I don't like the schedule. I don't think I know anybody that likes it, and these are the reasons why. And that was the main reason. She was like, we've had so many schedule changes, and next year we're going to start with a completely new one. And it just doesn't seem fair. And I don't have to think about that. I'm leaving. But that did stop me in my tracks, and I'm like, I get that. It's not fair to you guys, but like Scarlett said, there's always going to be something different. There's always going to be change, and it's not fair if we say that for the next senior class, but then we're going to mess with the juniors and the sophomores.
Well, I wasn't planning that. I just thought that the seniors, the upcoming seniors, would have had just a whole 4 years of messed up schedule. The rest of them, okay, you're getting some normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you two would land on your feet no matter what kind of schedule it was. But, and so I guess I felt I need to speak for those people who I think might not do well
I think
with it.
it's definitely going to fall a lot on the students and what they choose to do with this extra time. But I think with all the extra support systems, I know personally South counselors, CSSS, all our social workers, they're all there to help if you need it. So I think no student, students are obviously going to probably fall through the cracks, but there's going to be someone there to help them get back on their feet. And, it's just going to be making the most of it and figuring out what's best for yourself as a student and just learning how to advocate.
Well, I'm taking your opinion.
And those are important lessons for life.
Yes.
You know,
Right, 'cause there's not going to be that person to just walk you through everything. Next year, when you go post-secondary, you don't have your parents there every step of the way. You don't have
I hope you don't.
I mean, personally, my parents won't be going to college with me.
I think, yeah. I tried.
So I don't know. I think, yes.
And the thing is, some people don't have that now anyway.
Right.
And those that have are very fortunate. you know?
Yes. But yeah, it's.
Right.
But the reality is, there are students that don't require that level of help every week. And in a model like this, could be done after social studies on Thursday.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, they're
They have
elective.
work to do, though.
They could have.
They have work to do. Every student has a full week's worth of work to do.
Yeah,
There is
but they
work to be done
can leave,
in that time.
I guess.
Well, but that does reflect the world, right? The world is more about getting your stuff done, not necessarily where and when you do it, right? In many workplaces, you take vacation when you want to take vacation, just get your work done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of this is it's changing expectations and flexibility in the world of work just as much as the world of school, right? It's about productivity. And okay, so if a student doesn't need that time there and they use that to do something else, they still got to get their work done.
Yeah, maybe they would, if they're in the robotics, let's say, club, maybe they would want to work on their robot during that time. So they don't have to take time maybe from their job after school in order to work on that project. Or they might
Or just
be,
homework or whatever.
Yeah, but I'm just saying if they're caught up at some point, they might have another activity that would keep them occupied. I mean, you know, we don't want them out running the streets. I mean, that's not the plan.
That's not the plan.
No, that is not the plan. Pardon?
We do have to let them go at the end of the day.
Oh, darn. But
So I have two things to add, and then I'm going to stop talking about this for tonight. And one is some of the same things that we're hearing about seniors not wanting their last year messed up, we heard about when we put the master facility plan in place, right? Was wait a year to do the master facility plan because I don't want the hallways torn up for my senior year. We heard some of those same things. I don't want the school messed up for my last year, for my 3 years of school, or, you know, there's never the perfect time to make any change. As I've been working through this year, I heard a quote, I believe it's from John Maxwell, who talks a lot about leadership. And the quote is, "The future belongs to those who see it before it's obvious." And this board has done a good job of that historically, of making that change before it's obvious, before everybody's doing it, right? You did it with technology, you did it with facilities, asking you to do it now with schedule. If it was obvious, we would, like everybody would be doing it and just be, okay, that's what everybody's doing. Some year down the road, a school with enough resources like we do and enough staff and the right facilities and all of the right things combined, this will be the obvious change for them. What makes us leaders in the field is that we do it before it's obvious. We do it when it's right for our kids and right for our community. And the time is now. And waiting doesn't serve anybody better than what we're doing right now. So this is an action item later on tonight. And I appreciate getting the board's direction, whatever it is, later on.
Does anybody else have any comments about it before we move on?
All right, a few other items for this evening. Capital improvement projects, I'll invite Jim up.
Good evening, everyone. It was really nice to hear those spaces from the MFP are being so utilized. I mean, those numbers are unbelievable. That is so good to hear. And speaking of the MFP and just these last bids, we really did that at the right time. I am so glad that we did that 3 years ago instead of going into it now. Wow, the numbers are just so much higher. The market is so difficult right now. So we made some good decisions on the MFP.
Well, we knew it, right?
Yeah, we did.
We're all geniuses. And, yeah, you know.
That was all you made.
Par for the course for us.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's.
We got very fortunate. I couldn't agree with you
We
more.
would have spent a lot more money.
It's crazy.
Than we did. So I'm very happy that we're completed. So this is for capital for this summer. We have 3 projects: the physical education office at North, social studies office. These are renovations, and the varsity softball field, the dugouts will be demolished and replaced. We packaged all.
Carla wishes that was 3 years ago.
No, I'm not there. My friends just talk about it. Like
Yep,
the softball
it
team, like
needs to be
they'll be
done.
excited.
Yeah.
They'll be excited.
There's actual holes there. If you drive by there, you can see them. So it's really due. We packaged these together to save some money. So we had 9 packages, 21 bidders. So we seen some movement with the bidders come in and some good competition, but they came in higher than we expected with our budget. So we are adding a $100,000 to our $1 million budget. So we're at $1.1 million for capital. So we're compensating. We want to get these projects done. We reviewed the 9 vendors, and all the scope and the bid requirements were met. So tonight we'll ask the board to approve that list of vendors for $359,808.41. I'll answer any questions if anyone has them.
Request, is it possible to see a PDF of the improvements, the drawing work?
Sure, I can get those to you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask a terrible question.
Go ahead.
Is there any way to put any of this off that can wait until maybe some of the prices will go down?
Well, My gut's telling me that we're gonna see this for a while. That's
Oh,
what
okay,
I'm
we're
seeing
gonna have to
with,
ride it out.
You know, talking with White and talking with other school districts. I'm part of DuPage County with all the building grounds people. Actually, we saw less than what they're seeing. So, and we all believe that this is gonna continue for another year, unfortunately. And Mr. Davenport could probably attest to that as well. He's probably hearing the same thing I'm hearing. We can always push projects, we can always save the money, but as we push projects, the 5-year list then becomes
Gets
higher.
bigger and bigger.
And then
Yeah.
there's more money in future years that we might not have. So we like trying to keep on schedule. That's why we get that 5-year plan going, so we can get these done each year. But certainly, if the board decides for us to push a project off.
I'm just asking
Sure.
because I figure that it's a lot like anything else. It goes up and then comes back down and then goes back up, you know.
Right now, the forecast is not saying that.
Not
That's
seeing that.
what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Especially like furniture and.
Yeah,
you would
furniture's
not
terrible.
believe the timeline and the expense of furniture. It's truly unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it in my career. It's so high.
Yeah.
5-month lead times on windows.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's insane, and even if theoretically prices would come down a little bit, inflation's just gonna keep pushing.
It up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, as supply chain things straighten out some.
I'm just asking because I know.
I wouldn't want to tell those girls over at South at those dugouts.
Yeah.
There could be a mutiny on the Bounty.
No.
I'll let that to somebody else.
I'm not telling my friends that that's the big push.
Okay.
That's Scarlett's recommendation. She lives pretty close to you. I could send her over. And
Yeah. That's okay. I think there's a lot of people who know where I live. It's frightening. So I just had to ask.
Oh, absolutely.
Fair question.
It's very fair.
All right, this is up as an action item later on this evening. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Food service agreement renewal.
Yes.
I think this is, Jeree has got this one.
This is cool.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Well, I think you all remember that last year, we entered into a 1-year agreement with Chartwells to pilot a food service program that provides larger portions, better offering of menu items, and it operates outside the USDA meal programs. So we don't have to deal with all their restrictions. And so within the first few weeks of school, we were able to tell that this was a very successful program, because if you went to the cafeterias, you would see the long lines of students. So that was one problem we had to solve, but the students and staff have been very happy. We have the new coffee stations at both buildings they're really a hot item. There's lines at South there all the time. The students can go there from the Commons and pick up snacks during their study hall and that. So it's been really, really successful. So Chartwells has submitted a 3-year proposal to the district. And this proposal includes a couple of items here that I just want to go over. So it includes a 6.5% return on revenue schedule for all 3 years. And then in years 2 and 3, that return would be 6.75% for all sales that exceed $2 million. There's also an inflation clause in there to protect both Chartwells and the district. In the event that inflation rises above 2.5%, the two parties would kind of share the cost of that burden. And then the other item that I'd like to point out is that there's a mutual agreement upon the number of free and reduced price meals that Chartwells will provide on a daily basis at no cost to the district. And the number that's in this agreement is higher than the daily average number of meals that they've been providing this year. So it's a safe number. So we recommend that the board approve this 3-year proposal. I think it's, by doing so, Chartwells will invest more in our kitchens, add to the program, and I just think it'll be a comprehensive food service program for students.
I'm just really glad that our students are happy with it and that they're purchasing more more food, and we're not throwing away garbage cans full of
Right.
apples and oranges.
Well, did you see the change that was reported in the,
Yeah,
I mean,
Double.
wow, right?
It's huge.
I mean,
double.
I can tell you, I've put more money on that card this year than.
So maybe not everybody's happy.
So thank you.
There's nothing I hate more than making lunches, so I'm happy to pay for it.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
Job well done then.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what they vote with, just
That's-
doubling the
that's
amount
what I
of
was gonna say.
expenditures in a year.
Yeah. And this has been a goal for years.
Oh, trust me.
How do we get the students to start participating more? Because it's just been a steady decline ever since we've been on the
Once you
board.
leave the national program, you could do things a lot more creatively with food, which Chartwell's has shown.
Yeah,
I'm glad we did.
and our students are healthier because of it, even though.
Well, because they're actually eating.
Eating?
lunch.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And they can think better when they're not hungry.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not eating potato chips.
You said that there's a 2.5% expectation for rising costs? Is that what you reported?
If it goes above 2.5%, there's, I don't know if you've, in the agreement that was attached there, there's an example that says if revenues returned to the client are $100,000, but the CPI for the most recent December to December period was 4.5%,
Okay,
then the revenues returned to the client would be reduced by $2,000. So it's not a significant amount
Okay.
of money whatsoever, but at least there's a little safeguard in there.
got it.
That helps them cover the cost of food increases.
Got it.
Yeah, I was concerned, I didn't want to see them cut back on staffing.
Yeah.
So what can we do in partnership? So it's just kind of sharing the cost.
Well, job well done. Thank you.
Yeah, fabulous.
All right, Jeree had the exciting one with food. Mark drew the short straw with
Oh, copiers
and printers.
Making copies.
I know it's compelling, Mark.
What you've all been waiting for.
Yeah, forget all that other
Seven
stuff.
people.
Everybody had this one circled on the agenda.
Let's go.
We had a 5-year lease with Kanika Minolta, and we replaced a large number of machines with that in the back end. It was 4 or 5 years ago. Now we're having to start to replace some of the machines, and we've also increased a usage. One of the biggest things that East Campus has been wanting to do is get more access for students. Right now, a student has to download from their Chromebook into a computer in either the library or don't have one in the commons yet. And it takes time, and then you have to wait, then you can print it. What they're gonna do is get what they call a Smart Q or basic, what's it called, search student-facing software. So they'll be able to upload it just like we do if we have it, and then they can just go and it'll be floating around, and they can go to one of those two printers, punch in their 4-digit PIN, and it'll print. They don't have to load it and go through that extra exercise, and that'll give more students access to the printers in a quicker format. So we're real excited about that. And right now the plan is to have one in Commons and one in the library, community center. And what we do is for this one, we like to try and keep the cost in alignment with the year, rather than paying for 5 years worth and paying nothing for 4 years.
Mhm.
Because the dollars for this are incorporated into the per capita cost for individual buildings. And in this case, the bigger the cost is about, how many percent of it is for a large, heavy-duty printer at the South Campus. And so we like to keep it by building and by year. So we do it in a lease, which is relatively low. We've used Wintrust before. They have bought our bonds in the past.
Right.
We have a good relationship with them. We asked them to give us a quote, because they have a capital division which actually works with the retirement of the machines, and we can get different services at that level if we want. And it's a few thousand less to do it with Wintrust, so we think it's the right thing to do. So we're asking for approval of the lease. with them in the amount of $220,316. That'll be in the action side of the meeting.
Questions for Mark? Told you, riveting. Special education.
I thought it was great, Mark.
Well done.
Ignore it.
That was big, just wait for this. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Special education transportation.
You've seen from we use a lot of different carriers, or several carriers. We have one with Sunrise Company, LLC, that serves about 100 kids. And we are in a communal agreement with SASA. And we share costs with them, and it facilitates them being able to take the kids from their home school to one location. So it's good to get, these are usually pretty far away, maybe 15, 20 miles away, where special needs kids are getting special services and tuition programs. And so it's better if we can, combine the kids all in one ride out there, rather than having five different vehicles go out there. 13% increase is just kind of the number that's been buzzing around all transportation this year. When I drive past the bus web that they have in Westmont for students, they have it on the billboard, always hiring.
Yeah.
So they always have $5,000 bonus.
in.
So it's going to be expensive for transportation. The good thing about it is, typically this has been reimbursed at a fairly high rate by the state for special ed transportation.
Okay.
So even though we're going to be paying more, hopefully they'll have dollars to offset it for us. So that'll be an action item to extend the agreement with Sunrise for special ed program.
All right, questions for Mark?
1-year extension again?
Yeah, because we did put a penalty side into this, so that if they don't service at 100%, we would knock a percent off right away for that month's billing. So we did it for a long time. There was 3 of us that were working with them on behalf of SASA, and that was the big thing. We wanted to have a penalty if they don't perform.
Got it.
So this is a big,
Okay.
be an incentive for them, down to 10%.
Thank you.
Sure.
Riveting again.
Yeah.
Well done.
It's up for action later on this evening. All right, FOIA requests, we've received them, we filled them. You can see them on our website by clicking on fulfilled FOIA requests.
Okay. We'll move on then to the public hearing section of our agenda for the honorable dismissal of teachers. This next agenda item is a public hearing on the proposed reduction in force of teachers. This hearing is held in line with Section 24-12 of the Illinois School Code, which provides for the hearing when the number of teachers to be reduced due to economic necessity is greater than 5, or 150% of the average number of teachers honorably dismissed in the preceding 3 years, whichever is more. While the reductions contemplated later in this evening's agenda are not based on economic necessity, we are holding the hearing with the intent of giving both the teaching staff and the public notice of layoffs and the opportunity to express their views. To be clear, the reduction in forces contemplated later in this evening's agenda will not impact educational programming and are not based on economic necessity. Rather, these reductions are based on course selections for the upcoming school year. Do we have any discussion?
No.
And this would be an opportunity if anybody in the public wished to address the reductions directly, have the opportunity to as well.
Sure. The reductions, I think you read it, I was just making sure it's based on just the courses no longer being available.
The courses that students have selected.
Okay. So we're getting, the reduction goes along with the lack of course being needed or wanted by the students.
It's not a specific course, it's like students put in all their requests, and then once it shakes out, it tells us how many sections we need, how many, how many English 1s we need to run, and English 2s, and when all of that kind of folds together, our enrollment is down slightly, so the number of classes is down slightly, and then these reductions are to reflect the fact that we don't have as many courses to run in aggregate as we had last year.
But if we have an increase, say, a lot of students register over the summer,
Mhm.
and now we fill those, these are the first people we usually call back.
Correct. And many of these are part-time staff that is coming back at a lesser amount, or we're gonna hopefully will come back at a lesser amount and stay with us in hopes that that does happen, and it does sometimes over the summer.
Did I answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Anybody wish to address? Hearing none, may I have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Mike and Terry?
No, it wasn't me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris.
Chris and Chris.
My apologies.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the public hearing is closed. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Before we do, is there any item that anybody wishes to take out to talk more about before we do? I would just like to thank Joanna once again for volunteering to be our CSD representative. It's an important role on the board. So we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the consent agenda as presented, which includes the Personnel Report 2022-2023 full-time renewals, 2022-2023 non-tenure part-time renewals, transition of position classified, appointment classified, the Personnel Report retirements classified, resignations certified, resignations classified, the financial pages, the CSD Board of Control governing board appointment, the 2022-2023 proposed amended calendar, the 2023-2024 proposed calendar, and Illinois High School Association IHSA membership.
So moved.
Second.
Terry, Joanna.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the consent agenda carries. Next, we'll move to the recommendations for action. The first is a motion for the Board of Education to adopt the resolution authorizing notice of honorable dismissal of non-tenured teachers other than final year probationary teachers, and the president and secretary be authorized to sign same.
So moved.
Second.
Mike and Joanna.
Thank you. Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Next is the motion for the Board of Education to adopt the resolution authorizing notice of non-renewal to non-tenured teachers other than final year probationary teachers, and that the president and secretary be authorized to sign same.
So moved. Second.
Mike and Chris.
Thank you very much. Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Next, we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the hybrid block bell schedule beginning the 2022-2023 school year.
So moved.
So moved. Oh.
Mike and Terry.
Do I get an opportunity to make?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
The one thing I want to point out, and I don't know if this is an amendment because it's already there. This is for 2022 and 23 school year. So next year, we would approve this, the next school year again.
No, this would go into effect for the next school year, and that's what we would have going forward.
Nope, I get that for that. So maybe I should say 23, 24. Is that the way to say it? Because it's saying on here, it's beginning the 2022, 23 school
Right.
year. Let me say what I'm trying,
And
let
in
me,
in perpetuity until we change it.
that's correct. So what I want to say, and I know I'm going to probably goof this up for an amendment. I want it to be looked at again based on the metrics that we talked about in that next school year to be sure that we feel like this was the right move for the school. So I don't know how I amend that because I'm going to goof that up.
Mike and Terry would have to retract their motion.
I don't want it amended. I think that the board has the authority to come back if we wanted to next. We're going to be getting the reports back, right? We have an independent group looking at what's going on. We're going to be analyzing. If at any point along the line, so you as a board member wanted to make a motion to take an action to make a change,
Right.
and we always have that authority to do that.
Here's the good news, not that I think that this will be a train wreck.
right? I obviously believe
I
this
hope
will
not.
be very
That's-
successful. I'm somewhat staking my career
I don't
on this.
like the mention of this.
No, I mean, I'm literally staking my
When
career.
the ship goes down,
on
I'm
this being
standing right
successful.
there by you.
However, let's say the worst possible thing happened, or the world changes in some way, and we decide between now and September, like, whoa, we need to pump the brakes.
Sure.
The schedule's built on an 8-period day, right? It would take something tragic, right? But we have scheduled and built around an 8-period day. I'm not even recommending that we should do this. I'm just saying there's an escape hatch, and this isn't like you're going to the block schedule like a
good
4x4 block or whatever. You're going to 2 days a week. You're modifying what that schedule is. It's not a drastic change in the whole scheme of things. So, Sherelle, if it should look just terrible or the world should change drastically in some way, there is an escape clause. I wouldn't pull that cord unless we were plummeting to earth, but I mean, that just shows you how much of a drastic change this is and is not at the same time, right?
Okay.
So
But we've had an update every meeting.
every meeting this whole year,
This whole
we've
year.
talked
And we will
about it.
continue, I think, we will continue to have an update. And then not only will we have updates if and when we launch this, but we do have, as you said, an independent third party who's doing evaluation. So we'll have periodic and update from them. So I think, would it address your concern to just say this, we'll keep this on the agenda for the foreseeable future going forward every month as we have been doing? Does that work for you? Okay.
I like that as well.
Oh, absolutely. That's
mean,
the
we're doing
plan.
it
I
anyway.
mean, we did it with the master facility plan. We did it with the pandemic. We'd constantly updating the board on a major change is kind of my job. So we will keep that up.
And we want success, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's why we're doing this. I mean, if we're not
Yeah.
getting it, then
You're going to know it right away because
Yeah,
you're going to hear it.
We've had success, so that's the point. We want to continue to be successful. We are not in an
Exactly.
unsuccessful model now, so that's the point.
understood.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so does that address your?
Yeah, if we
your
can
issues?
keep it, monthly status checks, you make a good point, Dr. Seeley, like we did for the master facility plan, and,
Mhm.
yeah.
This will be a standing agenda
makes me
item. Get used
whole.
to it, like returned in person and master facility plan and, any other major change we make. We report on it regularly to the board and that trend will continue.
Any other comments before we call the vote? Julie?
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
No.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Next, we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve contracts for summer capital projects to the vendors presented in the aggregate amount of $359,808.41.
So moved. I'll second.
Chris and Mike.
Thank you. Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Next, we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the 3-year food service agreement with Chartwells.
So moved.
Second.
Terry and Mike. This one's personal.
Kind of is.
Terry Pavasich.
In a good way.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Next, we need a motion for the Board of Education to authorize the district administration to execute all documents required to secure a lease with Wintrust Capital for the 2022-23 school year, multifunction printers and copiers.
Enthusiastically, I move. We do this.
Second. Second.
Mark,
Oh, go ahead.
Enthusiastically?
Go ahead.
Enthusiastically, Mike, and then Joanna.
And then Joanna, thank you. Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. And finally, we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the amendment to special education student transportation services and transportation contract with Sunrise Southwest LLC for the 2022-23 fiscal year and authorize the administration to execute all necessary documents to continue this contract.
So moved.
Joanna and Terry.
So Joanna and Terry.
I think so, yeah.
Thank you. Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Jenny Jenny Hagstrom.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Okay, we'll now move on to the second reception of visitors, public comment. This is the second reception of visitors, which is intended for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes to provide all visitors an equal opportunity to address the board. Individuals needing more time should submit their thoughts in writing to the board secretary, Mrs. Nidak. Visitors addressing the board need to submit a comment slip to the board secretary and will be invited to the microphone. Prior to addressing the board, audience members should state their full name. The proceedings are being tape recorded for the purpose of producing accurate meeting minutes and are being live streamed. I reserve the right to modify these protocols if circumstances warrant, and audience observation of these protocols is appreciated.
All right, we have 2 slips. One is for Eileen Briner, but I think she might have had to leave. Yeah, okay. And then the second one is for Kevin Custer. I believe is here. There we go. Mr. Custer?
Kevin Custer, my son is a senior at Downers Grove North. In my last email to you, Hank and Nancy, you stated that you were not teaching CRT. However, your response revealed your true objectives. And I quote from your email, District 99 remains committed to embedding social and emotional learning, equitable and inclusive practices, and restorative practices into all learning environments. I find the use of the word embedding in the email and the slides tonight very illuminating. I looked up in the Webster's dictionary. Embedding means to implant an idea or feeling within something or someone so it becomes ingrained or essential characteristic of that person. These words reveal you're trying to indoctrinate my son and these students. You want them to see people as oppressed and oppressors based on skin color, race, and gender, based upon the video of intersectionality that all students were required to watch. You're creating 2 classes, oppressed and oppressors. True equality is achieved by maximizing the ability of people to become self-sufficient, not by dividing based upon race, sex, or gender. This board should focus on people's ability to become self-sufficient, not by dividing by race, sex, or gender. Resilience and excellence are common standards that challenge people from all backgrounds to achieve their greatest potential. On the scale of desirable ends, resilience, excellence beats equity and restorative practices every time throughout history. This board can no longer use linguistic shell games to hide your desires to indoctrinate these students. History just isn't about people doing bad things. Most of the time, the story is about people doing things they think are good, but are rooted in division and destructive concepts. Leaders who abuse power through deceit, linguistic manipulation, and dissenting voices are always on the wrong side of history.
Thank you, Mr. Custer. He was the last speaker, yes.
Okay, we'll move on to communications and announcements. Len, Jenny, anything to?
Okay.
You're on.
I'm on. Try to keep it short. So we had a meeting on Friday, March 18th, a week earlier because of spring break. We had a guest speaker, Representative Tara Costa. She's on the House Elementary and Secondary Appropriations Committee. She's sort of just, doesn't represent.
A little sliver of district.
Just a little sliver?
Yeah, a little
Okay.
sliver.
Okay, yeah. So she sort of just gave kind of an overview, as the ESSER funds in the last couple of years have pretty much put most districts, especially in DuPage County, in a pretty good place. She's continuing to look at how to deal with ARPA funds. I had to look that up. But she's also, constantly looking at revenue streams for the long term. She'd like to see some of the EBF evidence-based funding move to an above-the-line item, which allows school districts for better long-term planning and less fluctuation of money from year to year. Overall, she reiterated that in general, we're in a pretty good economic place. And then we sort of shifted, she said there's been no talk of a property tax freeze. There has been some continued discussion as to the evidence-based funding, and I think they're at a point of a 5-year review. She said the reviews look to, one thing they did mention is trying to keep Chicago Public Schools as a Tier 1 school district. And she said if that's the case, she'd like to make sure they're held to the same standards as the other districts. Then we sort of shifted to our meeting agenda. A lot of the bills that we would have interest in have kind of been held until the summer. There is a continued review of the CTE bill, which is the Career and Technical Education. They adopted some opt-out language. They pushed back the effective date. It was noted during the meeting that the governor has indicated full support of the CTE bill. There are some e-learning accommodations that will expire at the end of this term, but they are likely to be reviewed and revisited to allow for remote learning plans. One issue that they touched on surrounding this potential legislation is that districts would be required to provide full payment to support staff anytime a remote or e-learning day is used. And then we're running out of time after the speakers, so short after that. Next month in April, we'll begin to look at the budgets for next year. So.
Thank you. Joanna, Sassett? No report. No report. 99 Foundation.
We didn't meet.
Chris, anything on IASB?
In line with just the amount of teachers that are dropping off, there have been a couple of bills that have been introduced into committee that have attempted to allow for substitute teachers. They instead of teaching up to 90 days in a school year, it's 120, or is the proposed change. And then there's another that's, I think, substitute teachers are only currently allowed to sub for 5 days consecutively. That would change from 5 to 15. Again, just trying to curb some of that COVID loss. But yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
And a reminder that the IASB division meeting will be at North High on April 6th. The North High team is going to do a little tour for other school board members to come walk and see the projects at North. I think Julie still got a couple of calls out. I won't put you on the spot, but if you haven't told Julie you're coming yet, please tonight let her know so we can get you registered for it. It's you've been to these before, but it's nice to be the host.
They haven't been.
Oh, they have, no, because they've been virtual, yeah. Well, this will be your first ones, hopefully. But it's a great opportunity to hear some speakers, get some professional development as board members, and to show off our new digs.
Yes.
Are the students?
And what time, I RSVP'd, I believe, but what time is it?
We'll have,
I believe the tour is 5:30 to
tours
6.
5, yeah.
And then 6:15 starts the business meeting.
Okay, I thought I had it here. Thank you.
Actually, Chartwells is who we're partnering with to cater the event for us, so nice to reward them with some business from DuPage IASB, who pays for the event. We don't, there's no cost for us. We just,
we just host. And it's really a great opportunity to network with other boards and that, and so I encourage everybody to go, and especially because it's in our backyard.
It's in our yard, not even our backyard.
There you go.
It's our new yard.
And I will recognize that Julie has done an incredible amount of work on this. So has the North High team, especially Ken and Michelle and all of them.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a lot to pull off. Thank you. Upcoming board meetings, we will have our next meeting on April 11th, a workshop meeting at 6:30 here. And then on April 18th, we will have a regular business meeting at 6:30 again here. That, we'll just ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Chris and Sherelle, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned.
Really, no opposition?
I'm going to ask.